like to call to order this June 6th meeting of the Ascension Parish Council in Donaldsonville. At this time, there will be an invocation led by the Right Reverend Tim Dawson and followed by the pledge. So if you'll stand and remain standing, please.
Let us pray. Father, as we come today, we come with thanks in our heart in remembrance of so much and so many things you've done for us. First of all, we thank you for the sacrifices that many gave 75 years ago on this day when the storm beaches for the cause of freedom. Let us keep in our hearts and remember the sacrifices made and the lives lost so that we'll be able to do the things that we're doing tonight in this country. A freedom of speech, a freedom of ideas, a freedom to carry on the people's business. We also thank you for all that you've done in protecting us today during the storms that moved through the area. We pray for those that were injured. We pray for those that have damages in their homes, and we ask that you help them. We also reach out to our neighboring community in East Baton Rouge, where, to my understanding, there was a life lost, and we pray for that family. So as we move through the people's business today, again, we thank you that we have the opportunity to do so because of those that committed their lives for such an opportunity. And we thank you for the wisdom as you guide us through the people's business tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It appears that everyone has made it here tonight in spite of the weather and the efforts that several have made in their communities in assisting their constituents following what was terrible weather this morning. So I'm glad everyone was able to be here. There are no chairs additions. Certainly there is a public sign-in, a public comment period ahead of each agenda item. If you have a comment that you want to make, there are cards at the podium. You may take one, fill that out, and you'll be called upon to speak at the appropriate time. You'll have 3 minutes. This time, item number 5 is a presentation, and that is the first is and the only tonight is a certificate of recognition from Mr. Lester Lurch.
Come on, Mr. Lester. Mr. Lester is a very outstanding citizen of West Ascension. The Parish of Ascension is proud to present the certificate of recognition to Lester Lurch for your selfless service to the community and the entire parish by volunteering, picking up trash, and keeping his community clean, and by setting a shining example for everyone to take pride in their community and their surroundings. You are one of the people who make Ascension Parish the great place to live today. Thank you very much.
Thanks for cleaner outdoors is my slogan.
This gentleman does this almost every day.
Well, not every day.
I said almost. So, we would like to take a picture with you.
Appreciate it.
Councilman over here. Okay. So,
Mr. Lurch, we have a key to the parish. That means we can never lock you out.
now, this key doesn't open any doors, sorry to say, but
Oh, wow.
anyway, it's a good appreciation of ours.
Oh, my goodness.
So let's take a picture with these councilmen. This is the city councilman, Mr. Jordan.
Thank you. So, if y'all would kind of maybe just get up a little bit on the dais.
Well, I'll tell you what, we appreciate that everything you've done.
I can see about everybody. Beautiful. Thank you, Mr. Lurch.
Item number 6, the parish president's report. Mr. Matassa.
Okay, today we had, in Gonzales, we had a little over 2 inches of rainfall in 4 hours. Prairieville had 5 inches in the same time. So about 20 homes were damaged in Galvez area. Affected streets were in Villa Galvez, Shirleyville, Chris Street, Sherry Street, Sycamore, let's see, and they had a trailer for Exxon Chemical on the pipeline by our pump station that was overturned, and a person got hurt in that. Altogether, we had 5 or 6 injuries, nothing major. I think the guy might have broke his arm or his leg, Todd, do you know? The guy in that trailer?
I'm not sure.
But anyway, he's all right, and thank God that we didn't have no major injuries. We had some close calls on Chris Street for sure. I'm going to bring up Ron to give us an overview with the drainage. We got the men working tomorrow and the next day picking debris up. We're telling people to put stuff by the road. We have a guy here with the church in Santa Monica. We have some volunteers. We got the Cajun Navy coming out of Zachary for volunteerism to help get the stuff to the road. We can't go on the private property, so we gonna have all that coordinated. Ron will tell you what happened today, though, with the rest of it, pump station and everything.
Thank you, President. Good evening, Council. Sent out an email to you guys yesterday. We went ahead and didn't want to take any chances. We activated Marvin Bro yesterday around 9 o'clock in the morning and did a drawdown on that. And thank God we did that. We actually got about 1.5 inches of rain overnight. So we did pump through the night and had everything down again from the rain that happened last night, which actually did do some saturation to our parish. And then we got the big hit this morning, and we've been pumping ever since. So we actually ran all 7 pumps for a little while, but we are running 5 right now, and we will continue to run and not let our guard down and run through the night. Buxton Subdivision is manned and pumping. Astro Land has been pumped. Southwood has pumps delivered and manned. We opened sandbagging locations earlier this afternoon, and we'll be having people out tomorrow replenishing that. Henderson Bayou is being manned. I'm sorry, it's not manned at the moment. It's being monitored. When elevation is called, we will go and shut that floodgate. We do want to watch the A-meet and what happens at Port Vincent there. We are on top of it. As soon as conditions meet, we'll be out there and activate more Henderson. So personnel is, as Mr. Kenny said, we have other crews out with the road debris. All roads are open. We have debris crews coming back out tomorrow, and we'll be working this event through the weekend. And as we said, we will not let our guard down and work this through the weekend.
Now, to my knowledge, it was Benny Johnson and Dempsey Lambert's districts that we were in today. Both of them were out there. If anybody else has any damage, please let us know. We're telling residents, because it's a good bit of stuff, that if we don't get it this weekend, we will make another pass next week. So if y'all got any questions for me or Ron, we just thank God nobody got hurt bad. Thank you.
Yes, of course. Mr. Johnson.
Mr. President, as you heard, met you on the street out there today, and want to thank you and all the DPW workers. I've got several compliments on the response today from folks in my area. We had several trees down, some cars damaged by trees falling on, a few holes punched in some roofs, not as much damage as in Councilman Lambert's area, but everywhere that I went and talked to people, they were very complimentary of our workers and how quick they responded and how hard they were working all day. So we definitely want to thank them for their efforts they put forth. Appreciate what they're doing.
They appreciate that because every street, the people said that. Every street I named, every person told me. Very good. Anything else?
Just one quick thing. I know we was working with Energy and Demco. The response, I know they'd called in some additional contractors. If we can get an update and pass that along, that would help, because
I'll try to get an update and send it to y'all tomorrow, where we at with that. This morning, I don't know, 11 o'clock, we had 1,000 houses out in Ascension with energy. I didn't get Demco's report. We talked to Demco, with me and Benny, and the guy said that they were all over the place and they were short of men.
well, and that's what I want to make sure everyone knows. You know, a lot of these folks, they have nowhere to go, so they have to stay in these houses, and we need to try to get them back on as soon as possible. So that's going to be one of the key things, and the temperatures.
Gary Graves called this morning, and I told him, I said, I don't think it's the local energy's fault because they only got so many men, but we really need some help in Ascension, and he called up power companies.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Cagnolati?
I just want to echo Benny's comments. I had a couple of urgent calls today, and I want to thank Ron and the people in DPW for their really quick response. They went almost immediately, and they resolved the people, answered their questions, and took care of their problems. And I want to give them a kudos for that.
In fact, we had to wait on Chris Street, which is probably the most damaged, because we have a policy that we cannot go into the trees until the power is cut off. We don't want to have anybody get killed. So it's just something we got to do. You can't jump on it until you're sure the power's dead. So, okay?
Any other comments? Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Item number 7, the council committee report. Finance Committee, Mr. Chairman Dawson.
I don't have anything special to report.
Thank you. Transportation Committee, Mr. Lawler.
Yes, thank you. I just want to let everybody know that we're going to be taking up a public information and outreach at this next meeting. Part of what that's going to be is to get information to the public about road projects that we have going on, better update our Move Ascension website, and to really let the public know what's happening so they can anticipate things and know where traffic is going to be and not be based on our construction needs. That's the big thing that we have coming to the Transportation Committee this week.
Thank you. Utilities Committee, Mr. Saddle.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. The big news here, and at the risk of being redundant, of course, is the cooperative endeavor agreement that was recently executed, coming out of the Utilities Committee with a 6-0 vote. Very pleased with that. And then sanctioned by this full council 10-0. That cooperative endeavor agreement was executed with Ascension Sewer LLC. For those not aware, that's a consortium of Barnhart Capital Partners, AWT, a private sewer company that operates some 16,000 package plant sewer systems in the Prairieville area, largely in north of Gonzales, and 2 local engineering firms, GSA and Hartman Engineering. The plan is to have that consortium, Ascension Sewer LLC, to design, I call it BDO, build and operate the system. This will be a 30-year plan to get the sewer out of the ditches. And on the side of Ascension Parish, we would own all the assets, Madam Chairwoman, and we would be a regulatory body setting rates. This is a monumental step, as everyone knows, first step. What we're doing now is letting 90 days pass to allow Ascension Sewer in the parish to come with a second cooperative endeavor agreement, which will largely involve descriptions and detail of the construction and so forth. This is going to be a $225 million project by Ascension Sewer LLC. We're going to be able to do this with no new taxes, which is, I think, a wonderful thing. And what's going to happen is the $20 million of pipe that the parish has already paid for when we widened Highway 73, or I should say the state did that in 42, but we were required to put our pipes in there that currently lead nowhere. Will be connected via the airline highway and then going south on 73. The plan is to put a modern-day, state-of-the-art tertiary sewer plant on the banks of the Big Muddy in the Mississippi River. That plan, of course, will be totally LDEQ compliant, and hopefully will take the onus off of us in the threat of having a consent decree anytime soon. In addition, in utilities, we're still working with the parish utilities of Ascension, formerly People's Water, that the parish bought some time ago. I'm happy to report that we're doing very well there as well. We're finding more and more in the monthly reports by Mr. Daniel, the leaks and so forth that we were having. There's funding there now, and we hope pretty soon to be improving the infrastructure forthcoming. And basically, that's all I have, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you, Mr. Sadler. Strategic planning, Mr. Joseph.
Yes, Madam Chair. We had Power Coalition of Equal Injustice to come in and talk about House Bill 422. Basically, what it was is the House bill was to give municipalities and local government agencies a right to put salary rates, minimum salary rates. It was a long discussion. It was a lot of information passed. But at the end of the day, that bill was in the House and it didn't go nowhere. But they are coming back in the near future to promote it again. And that's all we had on that, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Personnel Committee, Mr. Cagnolati.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We met on the 21st of May and reviewed the SSA recommendations, updating the personnel policy manual. They were waiting on a few of the last job descriptions. They did receive them, and Ms. Wanda Galera said that she is going to be working on key changes and present to the committee at the June meeting, summary or draft of the personnel policy manual. The performance management pilot program was rolled out in a few departments this month. Responses from the pilot program will be sent to SSA for review and changes as needed. We interviewed for board and commission applications. We interviewed 2 applicants for Tourism Commission, and we reviewed applications for the ACUD 1 and Fire Protection District 2, and I will present those recommendations later on the agenda. We continued discussion on Section 2100 of the Parish Code of Ordinances, Bylaws, and Operating Procedures for the Parish Council Standing Committees. And as Chairman, I volunteered to draft some changes, and those will be reviewed at our June meeting. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Turner, I'm not going to miss you. Recreation.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As of right now, we're looking at the Jack Robinson Park. We're working to update the lighting system there. They're looking to start playing baseball there, and those light poles were in pretty poor condition, so we are working to get those light poles up to date. Also with the Darrow Community Center, we are working to get those floors redone. She's going out for bid for that pretty soon. And also in Councilman District, they're working to finalize the building of the new center there.
Yeah, some more for.
Thank you very good, very much. I'm so glad I didn't forget you. All right. Committee recommendations, item number 8, Personnel Committee, Mr. Cagnolati.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the Tourism Commission, the committee would like to recommend Karen Hatcher.
Move.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Dempsey Lambert and a second by Mr. Kluwat, or was it Todd? By Mr. Todd Lambert to approve
Karen Hatcher.
Ms. Hatcher. Let me find my recommendation.
Second applicant we recommend is Mr. Gasper Chafisi.
So moved, Madam Chair.
I have a motion by Councilman Benny Johnson and a second by Mr. Todd Lambert to approve Mr. Chafici.
And for ACUD 1, I lost my notes.
We need to vote on those two.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, are there any objections? Individually. We'll vote for the first one for Mrs. Hatcher. Any objections? Secondly, for, let me bang the gavel. No objections. For Mr. Chafici, any objections? Hearing none, vote on that one.
Madam Chair, I apologize. I'll bring it to the next meeting. I lost my notes on ACUD 1 and Fire Protection District 2.
All right,
never mind. I found them.
You got them? First one is the reappointment of Mr. Brooks.
Okay. Committee recommended for ACUD 1, reappointment of Ezra Brooks for a 3-year term.
I have a motion by Mr. Oliver Joseph. second by Mr. Doc Satterley. Are there any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
Next is committee recommends for Fire District, Protection District Number 2 Board, reappointment of John Roby for a 2-year term.
Motion.
Have a motion by Mr. Joseph and a second by Mr. Johnson. Are there any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
Next, reappointment of Mr. Malcolm Dugas for a 2-year term.
Motion by Mr. Dempsey Lambert.
Second.
Second by Mr. Oliver Joseph. Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
And also, we recommend a reappointment of Larry Zarang to a 2-year term.
Motion.
Have a motion by Mr. Oliver Joseph.
Second.
Second by Mr. Benny Johnson. Are there any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
That concludes my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank y'all for getting me straight on that. Okay, committee, down on to general business. Number 9, Ms. D. Bids to accept lowest responsive bid. For A, right to act as official journal of Ascension Parish Government. B, 2019 Ford F-150. And C, 2019 Ford F-150. Go ahead, Ms. D.
On May 28th, 2019, the Purchasing Department received one bid for the right to act as official journal for Ascension Parish Government. After review, the Ascension Parish Secretary recommends accepting the bid submitted by Gonzales Weekly Citizen and to place it on the Ascension Parish Council agenda for June 6th. Thank you.
I have a motion by Mr. Cluott, a second by Mr. Cagnolati. I have a question by Mr. Dawson.
Yes, sir.
Darren, does this meet the requirements in the charter? Do they meet the requirements in the charter?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
On May 21st, 2019, the Ascension Parish Purchasing Department received one bid for 2 units, 2019 Ford F-150 XL 4x4 Super Crew pickup trucks. After review, the Ascension Parish Fleet Management and Department of Public Works recommends accepting the lowest responsive bid submitted by All-Star Ford and to authorize the parish president to enter into any applicable agreement or contract.
I have a motion by Mr. Benny Johnson, a second by Mr. Todd Lambert. Are there any questions? I'm sorry, Randy. Mr. Randy Cluott, are there any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
On May 21st, 2019, the Ascension Parish Purchasing Department received 2 bids for a 2019 Ford F-150 XLT 4x4 Super Crew pickup truck. After review, the Ascension Parish Fleet Management and Department of Public Works recommends accepting the lowest responsive bid submitted by Courtesy Ford and to authorize the parish president to enter into any applicable agreement or contract for this equipment.
So moved, Madam Chair.
I have a motion by Councilman Todd Lambert, second by Benny Johnson. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 10, request for proposals. Continue, Ms. D, on A, dumpster rental and trash disposal.
On May 16th, 2019, the Ascension Parish Purchasing Department received 3 proposals for parish-wide dumpster rental, trash disposal, and recycling bins. After review, the Ascension Parish Non-Engineering Selection Committee recommends accepting the proposal submitted by Republic Services and to authorize the parish president to enter into any applicable agreement or contract for this service.
I have a motion by Councilman Benny Johnson.
Second.
Second by Councilman Dempsey Lambert. Randy, he did really get it. Are there any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. B, sewer testing and inspection services.
On April 18th, 2019, the Ascension Parish Purchasing Department received 3 proposals for sewer testing and inspection services for the Parish Utilities Department. After review, the Ascension Parish Non-Engineering Selection Committee recommends accepting the proposal submitted by the Beta Group and to authorize the parish president to enter into any applicable agreement or contract for this service.
Motion by Councilman Joseph, second by Councilman Satterley. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 11, request for quote. River Region Cancer Center renovation. Continue, Ms. D.
On June 4th, 2019, the Purchasing Department received 4 quotes for the River Region Cancer Center renovation. After review, the purchasing department and the maintenance department recommends accepting the lowest responsive quote submitted by Delcon, and to authorize the parish president to enter into any applicable agreement or contract for this project.
The chair would entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion
So I have a motion by Councilman Dempsey Lambert, a second by Councilman Dawson, and questions.
So what's this being purposed for?
This right here is going to house some of our departments. To my knowledge, the facility maintenance department and I believe human resource is going to share that facility.
Human resource is going to have a few offices in there, the maintenance, and then the health is going to have an office in there too. The building is a health building. The property is still for the school board, but the building is ours. It goes back from the flood. We're just getting to the, getting it done.
Okay, thank you. At one time we talked about like mosquitoes. Okay.
So, Mr. Lambert, that answered his question. So, are there any objections?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mr. Sadler.
It's not objection, Madam Chairwoman, but I'm curious of the 4 bids. I'm seeing a 5-fold difference with a low of $44,750 to a high of $226,000. Do you have any explanation as why we would have 4 bids for the same service or renovation in this case that are so extremely different?
No, sir, I don't have an explanation
that's an honest
for that.
answer. Okay.
That is not something that we can control in purchasing. That's
then
something that the contractor decided on.
I see it's budgeted at 48, so
Yes, sir.
at the 44,750, are we going to get what we want for that? You don't know that either, do you?
No, sir, I don't. Dean, would you give the...
How about just say hopefully so?
Yes, sir. I did a personal walkthrough with each contractor, and I assure you I read each and every reply that we got, and we are going to get what we asked for.
That's what I need to hear.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
And I'll be overseeing it, so.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dee and Dean. Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 12, change order number 4, Holmes House Plantation Steamboat Overlook. Ms. Martha.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the council. We are now winding down on this museum project with the partnership between the Federal Highway Administration, State DOTD, and the parish. I have a change order here, number 4, that will extend the time for 76, but even with glasses I can't see, that's bad. 76, and then a deduction of $9,164.20.
Motion to second.
Have a motion by Councilman Dawson and a second by Councilman Lambert. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 13, substantial completion, Holmes House, Steamboat Overlook.
Yes, ma'am. They're requesting substantial completion. There's a punch list and about 42,000, and it should be almost finished by now.
Motion.
So, have a motion by Mr. Satterley, a second by Travis. Are there any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Gentlemen, y'all need to speak up. I cannot hear who is...
Thank you, ma'am.
I don't know, and Cinnamon is going, yes. Very good. Item number 14, resolution in support of the 2020 United States Census. Mr. President.
I need Ms. Kiana to come up. She is our representative for the census program, and y'all do know how important this is because that's how we get our federal funds. And we also got Mr. Jeffrey Dewey here.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I just want to express the importance of the census and how it allows the federal government to give us federal funding and grants and money. We like to say that Ascension Parish is an ever-flowing and ever-growing parish. We would like our numbers to represent that, so we are allocated the proper funds. So I would like help from you all, your constituents, to alert the citizens to reply to the census, and as best as they can, President Matassa and I are working on a committee for outreach for our problem areas. Mr. Dewey here can explain in more depth, but I gave you all folders that you can look over, and if there are any questions or anything you want to tell me or ask me or get me to do, I'm always available.
Do you want me to say a few words?
Yes, sir. Do it.
Thank you, President Matassa. Thank you, members of the council. It's a pleasure to see you. I'm Jeff Duhe, D-U-H-E. That's from St. John the Baptist Parish. And I do work for the Department of the Census out of Atlanta. But I am happy to be here, believe me. I want to be brief, but I want to be comprehensive in what message I'd like to give you. Kiana has put a folder on your desk there. It explains a lot of the basic questions, and this is how I work. This is why I am here tonight and have been talking with your parish leadership. I'm a federal employee who is available to help you to do the best that this parish can possibly do to reply as best as we can to the census. Census Day, the benchmark is April 1st, 2020. And if we look at our watches right now, we're looking at about 11 months away. Isn't that right? That's not scary to me. That is exactly on time. And I commend this president and the mayor of Donaldsonville, who I met with last week, and the Mayor Barney, who I met with just yesterday, and all of your parish leadership for being exactly on time. 11 months out is a wonderful calendar position to be in, to put together a committee of concerned citizens and citizens who really actively work for the benefit of this community and this parish. And that's what this resolution is about, that President Matassa is supporting tonight. You are supporting it, right?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, absolutely. I knew you would since you wrote it. And I think I'm getting the signal to get off stage, but I just want to stress one thing. I'm here to work with Kiana. I'm here to work with you. The office is in Atlanta, but I live in New Orleans. And I'm from St. John Parish. I stress that when I'm with y'all or in St. James, I really do. If I'm in Caddo, I tell them something else. But I'm actually only working 4 parishes, and 2 of them are St. James and Ascension. And so my attention is completely on one thing, getting people in Ascension Parish and St. James to respond as best as we possibly can. And we want to put, back to the topic, I'm sorry, I get lost. President Matassa wants to create a committee, and we would like you, I advocate, based on my experience with the census, that one of the most effective things you can do is to create a committee called a complete count committee, and then staff it with, I don't know, you know who to staff it with. You know who are the people in your districts who are the go-getters and who will go to the Holy Rosary Fair and hand out census cards in November. And then when January rolls around, who is going to go to that VFW meeting and talk to them about how important it is that we have to get the census right? Look, just today, our prayers go out for the people that lost some property in Galvez today. Census is very important for disaster relief. You remember very well, 2016. Why do I even have to mention it? But census determines emergency responders. Census is the basis upon which, where are you going to put that firehouse? Are you going to be able to pay for that firehouse or that senior center? And census also, of course, is for federal apportionment. And by the time the census numbers come out for 2020, the folks in Baton Rouge will be working on redistricting too. So there's a lot of things that census data, it seems like it's going to be a little bit dry, touches in everyone's lives, and especially as public servants, you know that very well. But I'll wrap up by just saying the point of it is create this committee. Please, I advocate that, and the President does. And let's staff that committee with unpaid volunteers who really like going out into the community and generating over the next 11 months real positive spin for when when you get that card in the mail and it says, fill out the census, we don't want people saying, this isn't important to me, because we know better. Thank you very much. I appreciate your attention. And also inside the packet is my card. It has my cell number where it says mobile. That is the number that is on my jacket right now. It is my cell number. You call me if you have any questions, please, because my job is to answer your questions and to get Ascension Parish's numbers up beyond 70, maybe even beyond 80% response would be great.
So, one more thing. Kiana's going to be contacting you, Ms. Terry, to go speak to your board with the library, because they want 99% of the people to use computers. So the people that don't have computers, we got to try to get something set up with the libraries for the use.
Make
Okay.
sure that she has my contact
Sure.
information, if you will, Mr. President, or see me after, Kiana, and I'll get that to you. We have a great library team, so I'm sure that they'll be happy to help.
Move to adopt,
Thank you.
Madam Chairman,
Have a
with a
motion to
correction
adopt
for the
by-
date.
By
The
Mr.
date's
Dawson,
incorrect.
a second by Mr. Cagnolotti. Any objections?
Committee, thank you very much.
Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
Right on time.
Go. Item number 15, introduction of an ordinance to amend the Ascension Parish Code of Ordinances, Chapter 6, Buildings and Building Regulations, Articles
Move to
4. Motion to introduce by Mr. Lawler. Item number 16, introduction of an ordinance to amend Section 1323, water service charges to the Ascension Parish Code of Ordinances.
Motion.
Have a motion by Mr. Satterlee to introduce. Thank you. So at this time, we will begin public hearing on item number 17, which is the presidential veto in accordance with the Charter of Ascension Parish, Article 3, Section 3-04, to rescind the ordinance adopted on May 16, 2019, to revise the Unified Land Development Code, Article 5, drainage, regarding limitation of fill. We'll begin that public hearing, then I believe that the president would like to have his team, after public hearing, to come forward and address their concerns, and then we're going to move.
I'd like the administrative team to come up too.
Mr. Matassa, if you'll please allow us to have our public hearing first, and then we'll have.
I'm sorry. Wait till we finish public hearing. Thank you.
All right. At this time. Okay, don't want to speak. Okay. Mr. Dempsey Pendarvis.
You're supposed to save the best for last. First off, I'd like to thank President Matassa for vetoing this. This is I don't think some people in this room didn't realize the importance of what this is going on. I said, I've done a little homework. I've heard that, well, we're going to save on insurance. We're going to do this, but the additional cost of building it, the cost of heating and cooling it, is way going to eat up a little bit of insurance. My niece has a house next door to me, built off the ground, was built to 2000 and to the new FEMA regulations. She did not flood. According to this ordinance, if you rebuilt that same house, she'd have to build it 2 foot high. So the 5 steps, you're gonna have 8 steps. You get a house built up that high, you're gonna get it to where you can't skirt it no more. You can't do a whole lot with it. I had a conversation with some friends of mine that deal a lot in real estate, and they told me they built 2 houses off the ground on Don Lou. They spent about $16,000 more per house to build it. And she said, we can't sell them. And a good friend of mine, Harry Robert, made the comment, Dempsey, people could have been building houses off the ground the last 50 years. There's a reason they don't. Nobody's stopped anybody from building houses off of the ground. If we don't fix the problem, if we build not another house off the ground, slab, any way you want to look at it, we're susceptible to flood again. We flooded in 83, not as bad as 16, and we didn't have hardly any houses in the houses in 83 were was, we all know what the boom has been since '83 to now. Right now, today, if you put on the national news, it's flooding all over the Midwest. They don't have a boom on houses. They don't have a boom on people. They got farmland. Just the rain we had today. You can't control that kind of rain in that short a time. You can't even see the drive. When I look at this council, and not to discredit anybody or to do anything, I did a little bit of research on the whole council. Y'all own about a total of 25 acres, according to the assessor's records. Now, all of y'all but one councilman or two councilmen has property that's already developed. You're creating an ordinance that you pay no consequences to at all. None. Now, your ancestors behind you might, your grandchildren or your children or whatever, if we don't dredge the Amite River, build no more houses, we're still going to flood. We all know from just common sense the Amite River is filled up. Had been dredged in some pretty close to 60 years. It could be 58, it could be 61, but it's been a long time since the Amite River's been dredged.
Thank you, Mr. Pendarvis. Your time is up.
Okay, well, I'm going to say one more thing. Chairman Kezo,
please.
Y'all just sold y'all's property, your family property. Yes. I would have to look you in the face and say, would you support this ordinance if you have not sold your property yet?
Yes, sir, I believe I will. Thank you. Ms. Vickers. Excuse me, Ms. Debbie Vickers.
I'm going to first tell you, I'm not sure I'm for or against the ordinance. What I'm here about is that I just want a moratorium on all the new construction. I want something done about the drainage and the sewage.
Ma'am, if you'll forgive me, you really do need to speak on this item.
Okay, on this item, okay. Well, I will be for overturning the veto. How about that? All right. Since moving to Ascension Parish in 2016, I have gotten quite concerned with all the construction going on in the parish with what appears to be little thought to the infrastructure, the drainage, the sewage. I want things done about that. So I hear about this the ordinance because of that. And it sounded like a good thing. Anyway, my neighbors and I went up front today. We have had on Perkins Road for the first time, I spoke to the gentleman, the house flooded today. We moved over from Baton Rouge, Louisiana into where we're at right now, and we put everything we have into our house. And if you all don't do something, pass this ordinance, pass whatever will help it, that's what we need. Something that's going to help with the drainage and keep the new building from just keep going and going and going. My husband was born and raised in Baton Rouge, and so he's pointed out to me in the area that everywhere I see ferns and those prawn things, that is swampland. But when I drive around Ascension Parish, and to the gentleman there, Mr. Joseph, I keep seeing people just keep building and building and building. And so I do want an ordinance that's going to help that. And that's what I'm here to ask you to do tonight.
Thank you very much. Mr. Domain.
Good afternoon, Council. Thank you for allowing me to share these thoughts. And given the time, may I suggest these thoughts, share them, and then get an answer back from them with you, okay, as we go into further discussion?
Mr. Domain, this is not a dialogue, I'm afraid.
Okay.
We were happy for you to speak in public hearings, but
all right.
It's not a dialogue.
So we currently require a zero net mitigated fill for all developments, both commercial and residential. Can you share with us why this method is not acceptable to all properties, private and otherwise? Why is there a need for each site to provide a no-risk certificate signed by a drainage engineer which states this improvement to the property will not affect any other site in the parish? Are there any drainage engineers or parish engineer willing to say that this can work and are willing to sign off on it? Are individual property owners mandated to fulfill the same requirement of the no-risk certificate required that if they improve their property, they too have to prove they are not going to affect someone else? It's a pretty price tag to pay on such an expense. The ordinance that was amended refers to a 500-year floodplain map. FEMA is not requiring this, and it does not even offer us a floodplain map showing the 500-year mark. Can you provide the map that references this 500-year floodplain that's been referenced? Enforcement is the essential for the success of whatever ordinance is going to be put in so that we can grow respectfully. The concern is to how this will be enforced given the current manpower and staff. What's being done currently to get ready for this amount of work to be done? And do we have a budget to pay for the personnel, the computers, the office space, the vehicles, etc.? We believe there's a legal precedent that would be put on landowners that would preclude them from improving their property. Legally, this is a liability the parish would face. Is it possible this ordinance would be a, quote, taking without compensation, unquote, on current landowners? Is it foreseeable that many injunctions would be filed to prevent the ordinance you passed from going into effect, further delaying everything? Council, please vote to support the veto by our President Matassa. Let's convene a committee with land and drainage professionals and engineers to create an ordinance that works, that's fair to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stoney. Mr. Dustin Kluwak.
I apologize for the noise Rowdy's been making back there. I'm here neither for or against this ordinance, the veto. What I'm here to speak on is flood insurance. Probably not going to be a fan favorite, but as far as a 2 foot above BFE or 1 foot goes, my house is 2 foot above. I was 5 inches from receiving water in 2016. Had I been 1 foot above BFE, like everyone on my street, I'd have flooded along with them. As an insurance agent, my only advice would be to make everyone go 2 foot above that are in flood zones, and those that are in X go 1 foot above. The flood program loses $80 for every $1 you pay in. I'll repeat that. $80, every $1 you pay in, they lose 80. All right. They have to raise rates sooner or later, or BFEs to increase funds. And when they do, you'll be glad that you're 2 foot above. As far as the 1 foot above, for those not in flood zones, 76% of all flood claims happen not in flood zones. I think, Randy, you said it last week that water knows no boundaries. Of the 6 flood claims I filed today, only 2 were in flood zones. And I'll be clear that that wasn't all in Ascension Parish. The rhetoric that this will end development in Ascension Parish if we enact, 2 foot above is just ridiculous. Impact fees. Nobody will ever build in Ascension Parish again. Green spaces. Nobody will ever build in Ascension Parish again. With sidewalks. Nobody will ever build in Ascension Parish. You make developers do that. Curb and gutter. Nope. No developer will ever build. Well, obviously it hasn't slowed anything down. And the fact of the matter is, unless you reroute the Mississippi or our school board goes defunct, business is here to stay. I appreciate y'all's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Dustin. Mr. Brian Aguilar.
Hey, my name's Brian Aguilar. I appreciate y'all letting me speak on this item.
I am in favor of the veto in, for certain instances I'm gonna talk about here. The ordinance, the new ordinance has a bunch of problems, and it's not even been passed yet or enforced. One being the 500-year flood plain, having to build above that requirement and mitigate above that, anything in that 500-year flood map. If the ordinance passed as it is right now, we would have to make so many exceptions to the ordinance at this time due to the fact that we just don't have that information. I've talked with some of the administration at the parish, and I wanted to say that they do as great a job as anybody else, but I tend to have more questions from them than answers on some of the questions that I have as a consultant, engineering consultant, that would be obviously trying to get people to abide by this new ordinance. We're in a unique parish in the state, is that the parish ranges in elevation from 1 feet up to about 30 feet. So we're in that unique zone of, you can see it happening in Assumption right now, where the water comes up, it just doesn't have anywhere to go. I mean, we're basically, the lower part of the parish is at the ocean. 1 foot above mean sea level means above mean sea level. We're right there. And I think what Dustin was saying too is a lot of the flooding that happens is not even in the floodplain, so a lot of the things in the ordinance would not even help that. I know I passed by down Old Perkins today and saw 3 houses flooded right across the street from Councilman Satterley's house. It appeared that they were flooding, and they're nowhere near the flood zone. Nobody wants to see anybody flood, and I get nervous every time it rains, just like y'all do. Just because I've got so many projects out there that I'm concerned about when it does rain. And most of the problems that I see of the flooding is particularly right there on Perkins Road is that I think if the ditches were cleaned out, it would help that situation. There's a lot of problems with the ordinance as it reads, and for that reason, I think we could go back to the drawing board and clear up a lot of things, such as 3-foot maximum fill. Is that 3 foot of fill? Is it 3 foot to the slab, from existing ground to the slab? There's nothing really that explains that, and enforcing that, having the administration enforce those rules is going to be difficult. It's going to leave a lot of question as to what that height is. There's also some things in here that talk about an exception for anything less than 2 acres. The ordinance doesn't clarify in that if that's commercial or residential. So if the ordinance passed as it is now, we would exclude the commercial
Mr. Aguilar, your time is up. Would you wrap it up?
property below 2 acres. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Mr. Lenny Johnson.
Hello. Lenny Johnson. I own Ascension Ready Mix, which is now Quality Concrete. Didn't get my new shirt in, so I couldn't wear it. But I appreciate all y'all do. I know you don't get paid enough and all to put up with all this all the time, but we'll see what we can do. I talked to most of you, or basically all of you, in the past couple weeks or so, or a lot of you today. And the only thing I can pretty much get is, we have to do something, to make everybody happy. Well, so I just don't think that this is the way to go. Kenny's right. I know you don't hear that very often, but yes, Kenny is right, and I'm glad he did veto this. And I think it would be bad for everybody, even just for the whole parish. Not just for me. I know I'm in business here, but if we stop building here and we build in Baton Rouge, my business is going to be the same, but it will happen. You're going to see some movement of building. It's not going to be catastrophic or anything like that, but it's going to be bad. And I mean, you want to move things to piers that are, to piers that are over 3 foot or something like that. Pier houses are ugly. I mean, they're really ugly, not nice houses. That it's just going to make your property values decrease. I'm sorry if you got a pier. I did not mean that. But anyway, on the way here, it was a nice ride out to Donaldsonville for a change. And then I saw the Catholic Church, and I looked, and what the Catholic Church is built on more than 3 foot of fill over there. How ugly would that look if you got that beautiful thing on piers? It just wouldn't right. But anyway, I think this isn't the way to go. I think you're right. Everybody told me something needs to be done, and don't bend just because your constituents are saying, oh, you know, screaming. You know, Dempsey's right too, and whoever the other gentleman was. You got to clean the ditches, got to clean the, you know, dredge the bayous and stuff like that, and get a lot of this water off. If you were here in the 80s, as Terry, I know you were, Dempsey, a couple of y'all know were here in the 80s, you still had the same problem. There wasn't houses built everywhere. I mean, we had to go 5 miles to get a hamburger or something, you know, back then. I was here, I've been here 20 years, same problem, doesn't matter how many houses you got, I don't think that's a problem. You got to work on your infrastructure, got to get the things dredged out. Kenny's right, and today is D-Day from 1944. We appreciate all you who have served, and sure, I don't think any of y'all were at D-Day. But don't let this be the D-Day of Ascension Parish to remember June 6th by, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Ms. Pamela Caluette.
I'm glad to see I'm not the only one that was confused as to whether we wanted a red or a green label. I think I got it right. My husband and I moved here in 1993. We moved into a house that was 8 feet off the ground because we were about 20 feet from Bayou Manchac. We knew the land flooded, wasn't a problem. Until 2016, we've seen floods come and go. The worst flood the closest we had gotten to that point to being flooded was in Tropical Storm Allison, but the water still stayed about 1.5 feet from our home. We were fine. We got 3 feet in 2016. Over the years, we've seen it get consistently worse. And I gotta believe that it's the amount of development and the way it's being done. I don't think this ordinance is the answer to everything, but I think it's a start. And it seems to me that there's nothing wrong with it as written, and it's something to build on. I hope that you will all consider voting not to rescind the ordinance, which is against the way it's written, right? And to leave the ordinance as it was adopted on May the 16th and work from there. When you decide to vote, think about who you're voting for. Are you voting for the residents who are here and who are going to suffer the consequences of development as it's been so far? Or are you thinking about the developers? The developers aren't going away. As a previous speaker said, they're here. They're going to stay. This is not going to change. They're not going to, we'll see them. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Billy Aguilar.
Good afternoon, Chairman Casio, Councilman, Administration. First of all, I'd like to apologize for my outburst at the last meeting. I apologize that I disrupted the meeting. And may I ask a procedural question, Ms. Casio, to y'all before my time starts?
Caso, and yes, you may.
Item number 4 is public comment period. Is that a special period to speak on specific things? Does it have something to do with the public hearings? They didn't give me the correct answer. Item number 4 says public comment period, sign-in period. Is there a public comment period that goes on before a public hearing?
No, sir.
No, sir.
That just is my instructions to the audience, that there is a public comment period, and they can sign a card and speak at the time that they are called upon in the item that they wish to speak on.
Okay, all right. Appreciate that. Appreciate clarification of that.
It's a little confusing. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you.
And we appreciate your apology and accept it.
Thank you. Councilman, Councilwoman, I would ask that y'all uphold President Mattauser's veto. If you read his letter, it pretty much explains the problems with this ordinance. And again, my son said FEMA does not produce a 500-year floodplain map. There's none to reference to.
if an individual person is gonna build a house and they're 13 inches below base flood elevation, they put 3 foot of fill on their property, then they gotta build up 2 foot above the base elevation, they 1 inch shy from being able to build on a slab. But the question was asked before at a public hearing meeting, can we use a 12-inch form to put on top of that 3 foot of fill? That's not clarified in this ordinance. If you can't, then if you're just 13 inches below base flood, you can't build on a slab. You have to build on piers. I don't think that's right, especially for individuals that have over 2 acres. So basically with zero net mitigated fill, individuals should basically be able to do what they want to do, because all you're doing is taking, if you know what mitigated fill means, if you take a bowl and you fill it up with marbles and rocks, and you fill that bowl up with water, that top of that bowl is the 100-year flood elevation. Take the water out of it. Take the rocks and move them around anywhere in that bowl you want to go. Pour that same amount of water back in there, and all you're doing with mitigated fill is moving that dirt around in that bowl, and you fill it back up with that water, the water's going to go back up to that same level. You're not adding anything to the 100-year floodplain. So mitigated dirt is between the normal elevation of a ditch and the 100-year floodplain. If you use that, and if everybody in the parish uses it, then we can eliminate what they call a no-rise certificate. With the no-rise certificate that's required now in this ordinance, you're going to eliminate all commercial projects and all subdivision in this parish. You can ask my son. I'll ask Mr. Sherrill, will he sign a no-rise certificate? Because it says you can't have no rise in any downstream flooding in the entire parish. They can prove it for their project, but they can't prove it for every project going on in the parish. Nobody has that information. The couple of $1 million y'all just paid HTBE, whatever the name of the company is, to do a floodplain management study, they don't have the information to do it. So who can sign that document that FEMA's requiring? But if you do all net zero mitigated fill, FEMA will drop that requirement. There was an amendment to the ordinance last time that stated that an individual that's building a lot, we're going to hold his CO if he doesn't do his pond right. Why don't you do it with a permit? When you issue a permit to build a house, they have to have the dirt to build the foundation. In that permit process, why don't you make inspectors go out and inspect that dirt work to make sure it's done correctly, make sure that the engineer, whoever did it, guarantees that the work was done according to his plans, make the owner give you a letter stating that it was done according to plans, and then he can do his foundations.
Can you wrap it up, please, sir? Your time is up.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Appreciate you. And Shane Marler is present, although he did not wish to speak, and he is also with a green card. And Quinn Bubba Richard is also present and did not wish to speak. At this time, Mr. Matassa, you feel free to have your administration address the council.
Chairwoman Casso, members of the council, I'd like to go on the record that the administration is in agreement with some of the speakers here, and we recommend a zero net fill policy. And what does that mean? And that would cover every property in the parish. Any property that it utilizes fill has to be mitigated, all right? Regardless of how large the site is and regardless of how much fill they put in, they have to mitigate the fill, all right? Right now we have an exemption for properties that are below a certain size and they're limited to 3 feet and they do not have to mitigate. What we would recommend is pull that requirement away and have every property in the parish mitigate the fill. But I have several items that I'd like to go over with you. I also have members of the staff, Senior Planner Eric Poche, Zoning Administrator Lance Brock, our Certified Floodplain Manager Marcy Shivers, and we also have members of H&TB here and CSRS, who's doing our engineering review service, so we can answer some technical questions that you may have coming up, all right? First off, and as mentioned before, you know, part of our code of ordinances right now, it's in existence, it's in our code of ordinances, is what we're calling the C ordinances. As you recall, when we were going through the LOMA process, you as a council were being asked to adopt the D ordinance. That was shelved, you know, I guess a couple of meetings ago. But right now, we have in place a C ordinance. And that C ordinance reads, and I can read directly from you, on section 9.5-22, :9, when a regulatory floodway has not been designated the floodplain administrator must require that no new construction, substantial improvements, or other development, including fill, shall be permitted within zones A1 through 30 and AE on the community's firm, unless it is demonstrated that the cumulative effect of the proposed development, when combined with all existing and anticipated development, will not increase the water surface elevation of the base flood more than 1 foot within the community. Right now, under the proposal that you have, under the ordinance that was passed and is up for consideration tonight, we don't have a mechanism to enforce that, all right? If we adopted the zero net fill policy, that would basically take care of this requirement, right? So that's one of the things that we would like for you to consider, all right? Secondly, we talked about going to 2 feet over BFE. Requiring a landowner to construct their home at 2 feet above 100-year base flood elevation would result in a reduction of their flood insurance. There's no question about that. But would not give any significant points to the parish's community rating system, all right? So under the community rating system, we basically, as a community, get lower insurance rates. Right now, we're at a community rating system of 8. And we're trying to achieve our goal right now is to get it down to 7. That gives us a greater reduction in insurance. This basically gives us minimum points in order to do that. Now, if a property owner wants to elevate their home to 2 feet above on their own free will, they will get an individual reduction in their insurance rates for sure. But it won't help us tremendously with the CRS program. I'd like Eric to kind of address some of the other issues that we're talking about here.
All right. Good evening. Basically, I've gone through the ordinance and looked at, there were typical conflicts. Obviously, the 500-year floodplain is nothing we have mapped currently. The verbiage that was in the ordinance, it did reference the C ordinance, but since we had it in the Code of Ordinances, administration thought it would be best if it were repeated word for word verbatim to make sure there's not ever any confusion for that. And then there's a question of getting the baseline of starting from, because there are places all over the parish where you may have fill on somebody's property that was put there a year ago, 2, 5, 10 years ago. And in order to get that no rise certificate, the administration feels that it would be much more onerous for an individual property owner to get that no rise certificate when you're looking at the C ordinance and you're having fill that's not mitigated on other parcels, where they've got to look at the whole parish or an entire watershed as opposed to an individual property owner. We feel it would be much less costly to the individual property owner to mitigate the fill on their individual parcel as opposed to taking the entire watershed into account. There were in 17507, there were just minor conflicts as far as the differences between half acre, 1 acre, 2 acres. As Mr. Aguilar said, there were some instances where you might have exempted commercial properties from having to mitigate any fill if they were below 2 acres. And then the long-term accountability of the mitigation facilities as far as the ponds. What's the baseline? Are we starting from the time the ordinance is enacted and going from this point forward? There are mitigation facilities that are already in existence. How far do we go back and what do we do as far as that goes? And then there's the enforcement leg, where once a certificate of occupancy is issued and somebody's already in the home or in the subdivision, if you go through 5 years later and you do an inspection and they're found not to conform to the regulations, what mechanism is there for us to enforce that? And again, as Jerome said, the zero net fill addresses a lot of those problems and takes care of a lot of those problems. It's a more fair way across the board. It makes it less onerous on the individual property owner, and it precludes us from having to enforce the C ordinance.
I think as another thing, when it comes to the 500-year floodplain and the designation of FEMA maps, even the new maps that we just had for Conway, do not describe the 500-year floodplain. So it would be difficult to make that determination, all right? So with that, I'd open it up to any questions, technical or otherwise, that you might have, right?
Mr. Dawson.
No, thank you, and appreciate all the information. So I'm curious about this ordinance, the 60.3C. What was the language that was proposed in the amendment? How is that different than what's currently in the ordinance? Is there any difference?
There's verbatim, there is a difference. I mean, that was basically summarized, but Eric, do you have that exact language?
It's a C ordinance. We adopted the C ordinance. Is that correct? We adopted
the C ordinance is adopted. It was adopted
and that's what was proposed in the amendment was a C ordinance, right?
But it was more of a paraphrase of it than the exact language.
No, we corrected
what we would
that.
recommend is putting the exact language in there.
If you had the latest copy, that was corrected.
Okay.
And we had it was verbatim, what was passed was verbatim what was in the existing ordinance. And it allowed for a 1-foot rise.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it quotes the C ordinance. I mean, the only reason that was put in there was just to emphasize it.
Mm-hmm. No, and we agree with that. Absolutely.
Okay, so now let me ask you this.
Okay.
You still, in the current ordinance, tell me what year that C ordinance, how long has that been adopted in the parish?
I think it was adopted, it looks like it was adopted November 19th, 1992.
1992?
Right.
And we haven't been able to enforce that since 1992?
Well, there hasn't been enforcement that we're aware of.
You haven't enforced it since 1992?
When we have projects that have had mitigation and have used the zero net fill mitigation, these are subdivisions and large projects, in particular commercial projects.
They meet doesn't say anything about zero net fill. What it says, let's read it. Let's read it. Me and you read it together.
No, but what I'm saying is that when you do a zero net fill, which is what happens with subdivisions now and with commercial properties, you meet that requirement.
You meet the requirement. The requirement is to look at all past and future. That's part of the requirement of that ordinance. So you saying you've been doing that since 1992?
We have, not
well, doesn't that ordinance say that?
It does.
It does, but you're not in compliance with it then.
Well, the parish has not been since 1992, as I understand it.
Okay.
That goes way
So what's
back
the difference? I mean, whether you adopt it, the amendment has the exact same language, and you're telling me it's terrible and we can't enforce it, but you haven't been enforcing that same language since 1992. Let me ask you this.
All I'm asking.
If you don't enforce, let me ask you this. Tell me about that C ordinance. Is that a requirement of whom?
It's a requirement of FEMA.
So what happens if you don't adopt that ordinance?
Well, if we don't adopt the ordinance, basically it ties to our flood insurance program, right?
So I mean, it's my understanding that they could take you out of the flood program if you don't adopt the ordinance. That's what we were told on the D ordinance. Is that not right?
That is a possibility, yes.
So we could lose the flood insurance in the parish.
That is
we could lose the ability to have federal flood insurance in the parish. Is that correct?
That is a possibility.
And are you guys recommending that we continue to not enforce that ordinance?
No, what we're saying is that when we adopt the zero net fill policy, it automatically complies with this section of the code.
I don't see that in there. I don't see that in there. And then what I'm telling you is that you're saying zero net fill, but that's only for the present. But the ordinance, the current ordinance that we have says you're going to evaluate everything in the past and everything in the future. Tell me how the zero net fill complies with that.
Basically, because you're proving that you're not giving a 1-foot rise within that basin. So if you do a zero net fill policy, basically you're mitigating any fill and you're not giving any rise
I
within that basin.
understand that for the current proposed, but this ordinance requires you to look at the past and it requires you to look at the future. But the ordinance is exactly the same as what we currently have, is what's in what's in the amendment, and you're telling me you can enforce the one in the past, but you can't enforce the one in the amendment. It's the same language.
Well, what I'm saying is that under the way that you've drafted the ordinance, it would be difficult to enforce this.
But is there one word difference between it and what's currently in the ordinance?
Well, basically, to get an engineer to sign off on one of these is going to be difficult. That's the word that we've heard on the street.
The same requirement you've had since 1992.
Yeah, well, I wasn't here back then, Councilman Dawson, but...
Well, how long have you been here?
Yeah, I've been here 3 years, so...
Okay, so this has been in effect the whole time you've been here?
It has, yes.
Can even sign.
So let's talk about zero net fill.
Okay.
Are you recommending zero net fill and unlimited amount of fill? No limit on the amount of fill, is that correct?
That's what the administration is recommending.
Is that's your recommendation? That there be
that's the
unlimited? So if we have a subdivision that requires 10 feet of fill, then we put it. As long as it's mitigated.
As long as they can mitigate the 10 feet, or whatever that number is, as long as they can mitigate it, yes.
So now if you have a lot, let's say I have an individual lot that's 1/4 of an acre, and I want to build me a house on it that's about, say, 4,000 square feet, 3,000 square feet. Where's the room to mitigate that? How is somebody going to mitigate that?
They may not be able to. And if the lot is too small to mitigate, they're going to have to use alternate building techniques. And that might include pier and beam, it might include a chain wall.
So we're going to take people that have a small lot, and we're going to make them build on these alternative, use this alternative method, pier and beam. But if somebody has a larger lot, they're going to be able to fill. Is that correct?
That's
under your current one.
That's a possibility, yes.
Okay. Sorry, I'm moving around here. You said that the current flood maps don't have any 500-year delineation.
Well, we looked at the new flood maps that HNTB produced and have been going through the FEMA process, and they do not have the 500-year flood.
They don't have X-shaded?
No.
I saw an X-shaded.
X-shaded is on there, but X-shaded means that it's outside of the 100-year floodplain.
The X-shaded is a 500-year flood.
Not in all cases.
Well, we'll have to argue about that later, but, you know, I agree with you that most of the parish doesn't have the 500-year flood delineation.
Right.
But it's not true that FEMA doesn't issue maps with the 500-year flood delineation. And we had, when we did the one for Panama Conway, it's my appreciation that the X-shaded outlines the 500-year flood. Maybe we disagree on that. CRS points. So I think according to what you guys sent, and everybody agreed that we get, you looking for Marcia?
I want to get Marcy up. She's the expert on CRS points.
So, you know, you agreed that people get as much as a 50% discount on their insurance premiums if they go from 1 foot to 2 foot.
I don't know the exact
correct?
figure, but I know that they do get a discount by going higher than 1 foot. Yeah.
So if the multiplier is 0.92 versus 0.4 something, that's about half of one of them, isn't it?
Will their insurance premiums go down by 50% if they go from 1 foot to 2 feet?
Yeah.
I can't answer that.
Okay.
They would have to ask insurance.
Well, if I told you the modifier went from 0.92 to 0.4 something, wouldn't that be about 50%? So the multiplier, I'm sorry, I said the modifier, the multiplier, so on 0 to $60,000 in insurance, if you have BFE plus 1, your multiplier is 0.92. If you have BFE plus 2, the multiplier is 0.46, and that's how you determine what the rate is, what the premium is, correct?
That's correct, if that's based on the information that you're using. But based on the pamphlets that we received from FEMA, it wasn't a 50%.
Depends on the amount of coverage. I'm
Right,
talking
so,
about
yeah.
$60,000.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the base coverage.
That's correct.
Okay. Now, let's talk about the CRS for a minute.
Okay.
Somebody said, I guess it was Jerome said, that there's no significant advantage for the parish to, institute the BFE plus 2,
Okay,
in the CRS language, right?
yes, that's what he said.
In your own, handout that you gave when, on the veto, you said we could receive up to about 125 points. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So doesn't that get you 25% of the way to a better discount?
That would be, we get 100 points. If we go to the 2-foot freeboard, we will qualify for an additional 125 points minus open space, minus unnumbered A zones, and also a 25% difference if we don't meet certain other qualifications in the CRS program. So even if we got an additional 125 points, even if we qualified for max, it still wouldn't drop our CRS program from a 8 to a class 7.
But let me ask you, what I'm asking is if you got 125 points, you would be 25% of the way towards a discount. Because it's 500 points
yes, we'll be closer towards
separates each discount.
Yeah, we'll be closer toward getting that percentage that you're looking for, yes.
So myself, if I get 25% towards a goal, I count that as something that I achieved.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if we had right now 300 and some odd points, I can't do the math in my head anymore, 375 points, and this additional 125 would give us an additional 5% discount, correct?
Yes, that would give us up to a 15% discount.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't have anything else on the CRS. So mitigation ponds, let me make sure I understand correctly what the administration is recommending on that. The recommendation on the mitigation ponds is just to inspect them one time and then forget about them? What is the recommendation?
No, the recommendation is not to inspect them one time and then forget about them. They would like to see a process where they were done either every year or every 5 years, depending on the property, and then possibly have some kind of an enforcement, whereas if they don't comply, then the parish could possibly go in there and effect the repairs and place liens on the property if it's not taken care of by the property owner.
Well, I think we had that language in the amendment.
What I saw was that if it hadn't been done after 6 months, then no COs would be issued.
I'm going to have to defer to Councilman Lawler.
That was with the initial inspection.
They're looking at the wrong, okay.
Yeah.
But we're looking at talking about the annual inspection, we had some language in there that put some teeth in that, correct?
That's my understanding. Only for the initial inspection would you not get a CO. And that was during the time that the developer was still developing. And after that, say for instance, if the homeowner association had control of it, at that point, then we'd go to talk about what Councilman Dawson was doing.
Okay.
Okay, so, I guess just to summarize, what we're talking about, the recommendation, as I appreciate it, is, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong here, is that when you're saying zero net fill, you mean unlimited zero net fill, so that's the only difference between that and what we currently have is that currently we allow an exception for some small lots.
We do, that's correct.
Correct.
And that would be the only change.
More or less what you're recommending is what we have, what we currently have.
With the exception of the small lots, they would be included.
They would include the small lots even though there's no way that they can mitigate it on their property.
And there would be no exception to the 3-foot limit. So right now, we give an exception to small lots that we allow them to have 3 foot without any mitigation. That requirement would go away. The 3 foot would go away without limits.
But you would allow somebody to have 10 feet of fill in a subdivision, is that correct?
If they could practically put that in there and mitigate 10 feet, they could. That would be an extreme example.
Well, maybe they can only put 8. And then the next, and then you're talking about reducing the BFE from what we passed from +2 to back to 1, which is where it currently is.
That's correct, yes.
So you guys, everybody here is comfortable with that, and they think that, we build a house under these current regulations, people will be living in that for the next 40 years. So we're gonna tell them, go build a BFE plus one, and you'll be safe for the next 40 years. So everybody here is comfortable with that?
Well, I mean, that's hard to predict. I mean, we're comfortable with the way that we're making our presentation right now, so.
You just heard from the insurance man that most of his claims were for houses that wasn't even in the flood zone. You want us to tell everybody if you build a house 1 foot above, you can live there 40 years and won't get flooded? I don't think anybody in this house can tell you that.
But wouldn't it be better to be 1 foot higher? I mean, that would give you more assurances that...
One minute you're saying, let's limit the fill to 3 foot, and then now you're saying, well, let's push it up higher to 2 foot above the BFE. So you're kind of talking both ways.
Well, I'll explain the difference. 3 feet is the maximum amount of fill you can put in. 2 feet is how high the finished floor elevation has to be, 2 feet above the BFE. I agree with you they're related, but the only relationship is how you get from the existing ground to 2 feet above the BFE. So I guess I still didn't get that answer is that undoubtedly everybody here is comfortable that BFE plus one is safe for our residents for the next 40 years.
You're okay with not accepting the floodways until they put them on the firm maps. So I'm just saying, let's wait till FEMA raises it from 1 to 2 feet, and then we would change it, just like you would do on the floodways.
When are they going to do that?
When are you going to do the firm maps to change for the floodways?
Well, when they get issued in the parish.
It's the same thing.
Well, it's not the same thing. The floodways affect a very small amount of people. We don't even know. But we're not talking about floodways right now. What we're talking about is, I mean, this is a decision we have to make is, are we comfortable? Are we telling people this is a safe place to build your house, realizing that they're going to sit on that slab for the next 40 years? Listen, now, one of the reasons I'm concerned about this is I had a house that flooded in 1983. And when I built it, I was above any known flood elevations. But guess what? It changed in the next 10 years. And we've seen that here in the parish, it's changed. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I got away from questions, so I'm through with my questions.
You may question or comment, Mr. Dawson, that's fine. Mr. Satterley.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, and I borrow from my esteemed colleague, Mr. Cluart, and say, real quick, but it's not going to be real quick. I really came here honestly, and this is going to sound disingenuous, not to speak at all, but I'm just compelled. I've got a napkin here full of what I consider blasphemous remarks made here tonight. Let's start. I believe it was one of the two, and I have empathy to people out there. This happens to the public, so it's turnabout fair play for developers and builders. It should be the same way. It's not a dialogue, as Ms. Castle said, but it could be if a councilman brings it up. So let me bring up some of their concerns, and let's see if we can find out some answers. I'm not sure which one. I believe it was one of the two Aguilards. Perhaps it was you, Billy. You stated that you came by Councilman Sadley's house on Perkins Road today, and you saw that everything was flooded, and you concluded that this is for no other reasons that, sir, that the ditches needed cleaning. B, capital B, capital S. Okay? Look on my Facebook site this morning and take a look at how I published pictures of my pier home, because that's what saved me. 7 or 8 brick levels with mortar joints in between. I'm a brick and a half. Brick turned sideways is about, I don't know, 3 or 4 inches from water coming in my home. Unfortunately, my shed in the back, which withstood maybe $3,000 to $5,000 damage just today, is not on pier construction. It's on grade. And I took about 1.5 feet, close to 2 feet of water in there. My front yard was kayakable, as was my backyard. Yes, the ditches were over top, but as I told Councilwoman Cazzo in Annie Chambers, the most miraculous thing for me, and I'm no engineer, was the water came up in a matter of hours. And in a matter of hours, those ditches did their job. No, sir, Mr. Aguilar, they didn't need cleaning because the water was gone. And when I left, I could see my driveway again, the overtop ditch in the front, parish-owned ditch, which is being well maintained. Thank you, Ascension Parish. As well as the state on Greenbrier, owned ditch on Perkins, have the corner home. Huge, big, deep ditch. Big rain, inundated. Had nothing to do with ditch cleaning, I'm telling you. I would like to, let me finish, let me finish. I have the floor. We had an apology, we don't need to have it again, okay? Now, I've been threatened, and people told me to move back to Slidell last time, and I will not tolerate this. I heard another individual, Mr. Kluot, Dustin, I believe, come up here and talk about, well, and he's in the insurance business, right? I'm going to quote him. I would have had flooding water in my house in 2016 if it wasn't at BFE plus 2, whereas my neighbors at BFE plus 1 did. Whoops. Imagine that, okay? Plus, he talked about the tremendous insurance savings, but I'm going to leave that to Bill Dawson. I think he pretty adequately covered that just moments ago. Number 3, I believe it was you, Mr. Domain, Roy Domain. You said, and others shared your viewpoint, all of you builders, that no engineer's going to sign this, no engineer's going to sign this. I hesitate to bring up St. Tammany again. It seems to be a terrible thing. And maybe one day I will move back there, but in the meantime, I'd love to bring their laws here because I love Ascension Parish. And trust me, they have engineers over there signing up all the time, including on my property, which was just lifted by an SRF repetitive grant program through FEMA. Number 4, if I could collect my notes, Madam Chairwoman, because there are napkins here.
No problem. Everybody's going to have their...
Someone up there, I can capture the name, I believe the gentleman said he worked for Ready Mix Concrete, and he's right, he did talk to me and so forth. I apologize, sir, for not knowing your name. I'd call you directly. You said that pier homes are ugly. I take offense to that in both my Slidell home and my Prairieville home because they're both on piers. One just a little bit higher than another. They're lovely homes. In fact, I would invite you, sir, to come to my subdivision in North Shore Beach. And let's not tour it because we're not as affluent as our neighbors, but we can skip over to Eden Isles and go to Lakeshore Estates and look at pier homes that are up 14, 15 feet in the air. And they rival stuff you would see in the country club of Louisiana. I agree with Mr. Lawler, who spoke extensively on the subject and correctly in the past, and other speakers tonight. People are going to still build homes. They're going to come here for our schools, and we all darn well know that. Okay? Let's quit all the scare tactics about impact fees. Let's quit all the scare tactics about the green ordinance and putting in playing spaces for our children and sidewalks and trees in the front and backyard and add that money when you sell your home to the mortgage, flip it into a 30-year fix at low interest, and it's a Burger King, Coke, and a French fry a month. That's a fact, Jack. Where are we at here, Madam Chairman? Number 6 or 7? Oh, what I'm thinking about is let's talk a little bit about this CRS rating. It's not something I know a lot about, but someone posted on my site and guaranteed me this, and I can't get to the bottom of it. I was told we're 38 points away from going from a current rating that's in that veto of Mr. Matassa of 8 to 9. So I agree with Mr. Dawson. Even though we might have enough points to go to the next category and save a whole bunch of money, it's good to put those points in the bank and prevent it from getting any worse. Number, I don't know where we are here, 7 or 8, let's see. I tell you what, I don't know, we're going to have 2 rounds, so give me some time to collect my thoughts, not to hold us up, Madam Chairman. So I'm going to go ahead and yield, but if need be, I'll reserve the right for a second go-round. Thank everyone for listening.
Absolutely. Mr. Lawler.
Thank you. I've got a couple things. First of all, with the 3-foot max fill, I think it's pretty readily understood that you can use 3 feet of fill. That's it. It's not a very technical thing. You get 3 feet of dirt, that's it. If our engineers can't understand that that's all you get, that's what 3 foot of fill max is, yeah, I'm sorry, but that's what it's going to be. That's what it should be. I've heard people say that we're doing this just to do it to make people happy. That couldn't be further from the truth. You know, this is going to make some people happy. It's going to make some people unhappy. That's definitely a reality here. There are some people whose land is going to decrease in value, and don't think for a second that we don't understand that and we take that into consideration. But what we're looking at, what I personally am looking at, is what is good for the greater people, what is good for the greater amount of the parish. Not just population numbers, not just population, but what is good for the long term. So no, we're not doing this just to make some people happy. We understand that there will be unhappy people, but this is best for the parish as a whole. Others kind of touched on the CRS. I have some questions. Ms. Shivers, are you still here?
Yes.
And Councilman Satterley and Councilman Dawson touched on it. And I believe Councilman, I was going to ask this because I've heard rumors about it. How it can drop, right? Our CRS number can drop.
Yes.
How far are we from the next level down?
To class 9?
Yes.
38 points.
Okay, so that's correct.
That's
I've
correct.
heard the same thing also.
Yes.
Now, would it benefit us to have another 125 points on there so we don't drop?
Most definitely.
Thank you. Moreover, it's an accumulation, right? You don't. It's not a one-time thing. We get a bunch of points and we have to sit there.
No, what it is we go through a audit every 5 years, different things that you do within the parish to obtain points to go from one class to another class.
Okay, so during, do you know when the next 5-year audit is?
2021.
Okay, so we have enough time that if we accumulate that 125 points, you could probably come back to us with some recommendations on other things that we could do to reach the next level. Would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay, that's something we're probably going to want to see one day. You know, I thank you very much. I'll move on to the next subject. I don't want to stand up there the whole time. You know, I also heard that if you got, you know, you limit it to 3 feet of fill, that what are you going to do with somebody that, you know, is 13 inches above and they can't add 3 feet, they've got an inch. Once again, I'm not an engineer, but I think it's pretty simple. You could put a 1-foot dirt pad and put a chain wall building up there that's 2 feet tall. You can put 2 feet in a chain wall. I've seen lots of houses in this parish that are gorgeous. If you look across from St. John's Church, I think y'all know where that is, they've got a huge white house, chain wall, built up. It is gorgeous. They didn't seem to have any problems getting that built and limiting their fill. Now, they use some fill there, but I'm telling you, it can be done. I do have a question, and maybe Mr. Fournier can help with this. Are y'all familiar with Brookstone subdivision?
Are we familiar with it? Yes.
Okay, in that subdivision, they're supposed to have mitigated their fill, correct?
Correct.
And that means that the surrounding areas shouldn't have had water on them, based on the engineering.
Right.
Okay, I've got people in the crowd tonight that were literally inches away from having their structures flooded and their pools flooded. So what we have now, I'm telling you right now, is not working.
Okay.
And, you know, I'm not going to ask you to turn around and look them in the eye because they're here right now. They've been talking to people. But I'm telling you, what we have is, hey, they got to limit their fill. They've got to have zero net fill in that subdivision. Yet they're putting water on a whole street of people.
Well, we're familiar with Brookstone. They're going through the construction phase right now. They're right north of what's called Reese Lane. And the water from Brookstone, we're familiar with that problem, and we've basically got the engineer out there to correct the problem.
I understand that.
And that occurred before today's rain, by the way.
It's occurred several times with them.
It has.
And I understand that y'all been out there correcting it, but my point is, the engineers put together a plan that was supposed to protect the surrounding area, and it failed miserably.
Yeah.
And we're supposed to believe that if we go to zero net fill based on these engineering plans, that everybody's going to be perfect with it? That we're not going to have the exact same problem that we have in subdivision after subdivision after subdivision?
Right. Well, I don't have an answer to that, but the engineering is supposed to work, and most times, in fact, practically every time it does.
Mr. Fournier, I'm not putting you on the spot here, but I know you know the subdivision. I'm not calling you out on this. I know you've been doing what you can to help that situation.
Right.
I'm making a point that, you know, this engineering stuff that we've been talking about, a lot of it's good. If you fly an airplane, it really works well most of the time. It doesn't seem to be working in Ascension Parish when it comes to flooding. The engineering, I don't know what it is about local engineers, but we're having a lot of problems with it. Whether it's not understanding 3 feet of fill or not doing what, I don't understand why we're having so many problems with that. Thank you.
Thank you.
You know, I've been taking notes on this and reading things and talking about the insurance on it. Well, I get all kind of notes, don't I? What I've looked at there are two major aspects to what we're doing here with this ordinance. Number one is the 2-foot BFE, building above that. You know, this is less to the people up there and more to the people sitting up here. But why? Why is that important? Because that looks towards the future, the 2-foot BFE. That looks to our children and to our grandchildren that we want remaining close to us. We want our children and our grandchildren that are in middle school and in high school and getting out of college, we want them to move back home with this and live close to us. And by requiring builders to build up to 2-foot BFE, that's going to ensure that maybe for another 40 years that they're safe. This is about, I know a lot of people sitting up here and out there have children and grandchildren that they hope will remain in the area, and I don't think any of us would be comfortable telling them, you know what, stay at 1-foot BFE, because it's not a wise decision. Because one of the problems we have in our area, we've heard it before, we've got subsidence, can't say that right. It's when the ground sinks. Our ground is sinking, there's no doubt about it. So when you build up 1 foot above BFE, in a couple years you're 11 inches above BFE. A little after that, you're going to be 10 inches above BFE. So that is why 2 foot above BFE is so important, because it's going to help our children and our grandchildren that we want to remain close to us. And if you think that you shouldn't override this veto, go home and look at your children, look at your grandchildren, and you tell them that. You tell them that you didn't think it was important that their futures, that they have a house that's safe if you want them to remain in the area. If you didn't want them to save money. Now, we've heard how being 2 foot above BFE is important. I know I teach my children the value of money, and I do things to help them both increase their earning potential and to learn how to save money and be smart with their money. And we're not going to teach them that lesson. We're going to tell them, hey, you know what? We didn't care enough about you. We thought, hey, 1 foot is good enough. We've had it all these years. But I can tell you, it's not good enough. 2 foot above base flood elevation is where it needs to be. And, you know, last time somebody tried to eviscerate the 1 foot above, eviscerate this entire ordinance by changing it back to 1 foot BFE. That's just ridiculous. I don't understand. Why would we not change what is not working for us? It's a problem. Today, I drove around my district. I went to 3 houses that were flooded. Not a single one would have flooded if they'd been 2 feet above BFE, if they'd been a foot higher. Not a single one of those houses would have flooded. Now, they weren't all because of new development. I can tell you one, they had plywood stuck in a drain, blocking a whole drain pipe, which is just, quite honestly, it's bad luck. It's, you know, we clean out these drains on a regular basis. Who drops plywood in there, I don't know. But, you know, it's not just about our children and grandchildren. All of us up here, sitting up here, represent people that have lived in this parish for years, for decades. That's where you limit the 3 foot. Because what we don't want is we don't want a subdivision going up to right next door to another homeowner, to a subdivision, and it's going to put water on them. Now, we get engineering that says it doesn't, but I can tell we got people out there that know that the engineering isn't worth the paper it's written on. As Councilman Satterley is fond of saying, many times it's not. This is about helping our current residents, the people in Quail Creek, the people in Lake Somerset, and Wood Lake, and Driftwood, and Cessna. Those are the people that have lived here for years. Are we telling them that their property is not important enough for us to do something to make a difference for them? I'm willing to say that we need to do something. Not just to make people feel good, but this is going to make a long-term difference, and we need to do this. Because if we're saying that we're going to go to zero net fill, that's exactly what we have now, and it's not doing anything. That's what the veto would do. Go back to where we were before and continue to allow people to flood. I'm begging the people up here to make the right decision for their children, for their grandchildren, and for their friends and family and neighbors that live around them, that are relying on them to make the right long-term decision. Yeah, you know what? A couple big landowners and a couple of developers are going to find that it's more expensive to build, and that's life. You roll it into a 30-year mortgage, and you pay for it, or maybe you build a smaller house. Or maybe your 40 acres that you were ready to build your subdivision on, you can't get as much for it. But you know what? That's life. I'm not going to tell my children and grandchildren that I didn't care enough about them, that I was more worried about what somebody wants to do with their 40 acres. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Yep.
Mr. Coulon?
I'll let Doc go a second round.
I have a couple of questions. So we have zero net fill now, and we have subdivisions next to landowners in the floodplain that are 7, 8 feet above their neighbors. Am I correct to say that?
There are some instances like that. Not many, but there are some.
Those are the ones that cause me to struggle. It is so unfortunate to see a house that someone could play a game on their roof from the backyard of the other house. And we do have that. And so that's why I certainly support limiting fill. Because it just drives me crazy to see that. It's unattractive. It's dangerous. I feel like, water sheets off of properties that are side by side. Now, you can correct me. I am certainly no engineer. But when you build that one lot up, or that one tract of land that's been sold up 7 or 8 feet, and your neighbor is down here, the engineering may say that none of that water is coming onto him. And I don't argue that I think sometimes we have excellent engineers and they do a great job, and they're probably absolutely right. Their water is going in their pond. My concern is that his water can't go anywhere. It's blocked by this wall next door to him. And water has typically, over the time in memoriam, shifted from one lot to the other. So the local homeowner who's been there a long, long time now has a whole lot of water in his yard, and he believes that subdivision is the cause. And in some ways, he's kind of sort of right, in that his water can't move off of his land and sheet onto his neighbor. Am I anywhere in the right neighborhood here, Jerome? I'm not an engineer, so help me.
I know, I'm not an engineer either, but I can have Sean to come up here and address it. But a lot of people have that perception, and in a lot of cases it is a perception. In some cases it might be reality, And a lot of it has to do with, the neighboring drainage pattern that's around that subdivision. Are the ditches clear, to allow that water to drain properly? We've been working with our engineers to make sure that occurs, So if there is a wall, like you described, there should be some type of drainage that's near that wall that takes the water away from it. What we used to call, what you're calling sheet flow. Sheet flow is certainly a technical term where water flows onto on a vacant property in a sheet fashion. There's no formed ditch. Those ditches need to be put in place once the fill is built up, and those ditches are what carries the water away from what used to sheet flow. All right.
I appreciate that. It's a question that's been bothering me.
And I can have Sean come up here.
That's not necessary. I think the layman's terms were fine.
All right, okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
So, I want to get to, I think I have another question. Ms. Shivers. What is the most significant thing that we can do to reduce our points, or to reduce our level? What, in your opinion, and I'm just asking for your opinion, what's the most significant thing we can do? What do you see other communities do that lowers their grade?
A lot of communities get a lot of points in open space for CRS. So that's what we're working on. The master land use project that was just voted on and approved on the last meeting, that's something that's going to also be able to be implemented in the CRS program to give us additional points to work on that Class 7 rating that we're looking for.
Okay. All right. So you're our floodplain manager.
Yes, ma'am.
What's the consequence, zero net fill or otherwise, of putting dirt in our floodplain fill? Mitigated, maybe sort of, maybe not. What's the consequence of putting dirt in our floodplain?
Well, all fill on the property should be mitigated. With talking about a 3-foot number or a 2-foot number, we just need to figure out some way to come to a common ground that fill needs to be mitigated anywhere, anytime it's put on the property.
Thank you. I needed a little bit of clarification for me. This morning we had flash flooding that affected several areas of our parish. A lot of rain fell in a very short period of time. I don't believe that our ditches needed to be dug out either. We saw that water go away very quickly as well. And I know that people understand that you cannot drain your bathtub while the water's running. So that's how I have to look at it. And I have to keep it real simple. If it's raining, it's not going to run off. You're going to have some rise in your water, your ditches in your yard. Once you cut the water off, it can drain. And that definitely happened today. But drainage is a heck of a lot more complicated than that. And I know it. And weather patterns are changing. And I know it. More rainfall, higher water levels. All of this is a cycle. I don't know if chemical plants caused it, the oil and gas caused it, and I don't care who caused it. I don't know if it was man-made, if it's an act of God. It has changed. And because we know it's changed, and we know we have to live in this parish, in this cycle of change, however long that might last, 2 years, 10 years, 100 years, whatever that cycle might be, we need to be very concerned about how we live and how we grow. Now, crafting ordinances that protect life and property is very challenging because it does affect the rights of property owners, and that has to be weighed against the risk of flooding. Consensus has been extremely difficult to achieve. We started this process in August of 2017. Councilman Lambert made the motion, Todd Lambert made the motion. Councilman Lawler, they rarely have consensus, but Councilman Lawler seconded it. We had consensus in 2017 that we had to do something, and we hired experts to help us. This process culminated 3 weeks ago in the passage of an ordinance that was a long way from being perfect, obviously. And it certainly is not going to prevent flooding. But it can prevent damage to property. And while it's not perfect, and our parish staff has shared many reasons why we need to implement this cautiously and improve enforcement and make some changes, particularly those where there was conflict between the ordinance and other ordinances. We had a lot of discussion about that before the veto. And I thought we had reached another consensus between the staff, how we would make some changes that would correct what you all saw as problems. And then Mr. Matassa decided that he needed to veto, as is his right. And we have worked since then in meetings to continue to address the concerns of the administration, to have you educate us, to have you, and for us to assure you that we will quickly amend this ordinance to address conflicts, and make there be an ease of implementation. So regardless of what happens here tonight, we're going to tweak a living document. We understand that it was not perfect. We can make it work for the purpose that it was intended.
Madam Chairman, if you finish.
Yes. So I will, that is the comments that I wanted to make around this. I do not see this as the end all tonight. I think that whatever transpires, we will figure out how to work forward. We agreed that we would do that the other day. So, and we do acknowledge that there are some conflicts. So there are some other comments. Mr. Lambert.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Guys, I've been on the board, this is my 20th year on the council, so I've seen a lot, been through a lot. Right when I got out of high school in 78, 79, we fought a flood, and it's devastating to the people. And yes, I've fought a lot of issues in my districts. My district's changed probably 3 or 4 times while I've been on the council. A couple of developments got built in some I call it floodways. I tried to oppose it, but they met all the guidelines. They built them. Well, guess what? They flooded. Brand new homes flooded. They put a big ditch around the whole property, said that was going to take care of it. Did not take care of it. The homes flooded. We had to do something. Is this ordinance perfect? It may not be, but we need to step up and get it moving and work as a team to critique it with administration to be able to enforce it like it needs to be with the planning and zoning directors and commission. Like I said, I'm definitely not for unlimited fill. Mitigation, I've seen land mitigated with ponds, and right behind it, we had the big flood. Don't get me wrong, it was a 2016 backwater flooding, but it's still, water spreads across the whole property, the land, and I know some homes wouldn't have flooded if, some big developments wouldn't have been raised up 5, 6, 7 feet. So I'm definitely against unlimited fill. Is 3 foot the right amount? I'm not sure. But, if we're going to put 3 foot of dirt, yes, they can put a 12-inch form board and put a 12-inch slab on top of that 3 foot. So you add 4 foot to the bottom of your slab, and it's doable. And, as far as just 1 inch or whatever, that can make it, we can make that happen with that. And I don't think 1 inch is going to be a problem. You can just raise. And I know quite a few chain walls. Some of the new homes are getting built. My little nephew's building one right now that's got a chain wall. It's looking at the house, you don't see any difference in it, but his floors are way up when you walk in his house. I see both parts. I'm right in the middle with it, but I think we need to move forward with the ordinance. Some type of ordinance. I'm not for killing this ordinance totally tonight. If it needs to be changed, I'm willing to work rapidly, move with whoever wants to work, and let's get this ordinance where administration can make it, live with it and have a working tool to move forward. So that's my take on it. And like I said, after 20 years, and got a couple of guys, say I didn't do nothing in 20 years, but there's a lot I've done in 20 years, believe me, on the council. Thank you.
So we have, I'm trying to get everybody who hasn't commented first. Mr. Kluwat.
You guys. Yeah, when we deliberated last time on this, last meeting and voted on this, we had, watched around, we weren't all there, but we had changes within that meeting. I feel there's several reasons. I'm right along the lines with Todd, but I'm gonna tell you right now, first thing is, we talked about the 2016 flood. There's nothing that we have planned that's gonna stop us from that 2016 flood. Let's face the reality. What we do have is working on regional projects, things we gotta do. We gotta dredge the Amite River. It doesn't take somebody to have to stand at the podium and say that. We all know that. That has to be done. We gotta fix the weir. we've gotta do the 22 opening, Highway 22 opening, get the backwater, get that water out of that bottleneck. There's a lot of things need to happen on Bayou Manchac. What we're not in control of is the water above our parish. And I'm asking everybody, as we have beat up and got 100% support so far with our state and federal delegation to make these regional projects happen. Some of them are going forward that have been sitting around for 20 years. But they're going forward now. We need that to help us. And we're talking about some of the local projects that we've had. But I also agree with the zero net fill that takes care of, you take care of your own there, okay? I'm with Todd that I don't know if you build up 4 feet and you flood somebody, or in the same place you build up 10 feet and you still flood them, okay? All right? I do believe in the engineering, but I don't know that the engineering encompasses all that can happen. I don't have a lot of big subdivisions in the district that I represent. And Doc, when that water left your ditch, it left you, but I know where it's going. Coming down there and see us in Sandoval.
You're welcome.
All right? Thank you. All right, and you know, we have a very large portion of area within our district there that's within the 100-year floodplain. And as far as building the house off the ground any way you want, I got one, okay. And it may be ugly to somebody else. I kind of like it, but we need to work with our federal legislation and our delegation and continue to try to work these FEMA regulations with the National Flood Insurance Program that are totally unfair. We've had a real estate guys, you know, sent us something well over a month ago. I got an insurance agent to look it up, that if you 1 foot above floodplain and you're on pier and beam, and then if you're 1 foot above floodplain and you're on a land mound built up with a slab, then it's not treated the same, okay? Elevation is elevation in the common sense. So there's a lot of things that just don't work out. And people get beat up and they get frustrated and they're trying to qualify for something, trying to do something. I think, what is the max? We're talking about 1 foot or 2 foot. Isn't after 4 feet? What is that? What is that? Is it 4 feet? After you go 4 feet above floodplain, you get 0 credits. Is that correct, Jerome?
That's my understanding.
That's what I'm hearing from the insurance folks also.
There's no difference between 3 and 4.
So, we were close to not passing this the last round, okay? And right now, you know, I stated in the last meeting that we would probably end up with some changes, as Council Chairwoman Caswell said, that this living document. But we're gonna, whether it's through veto or whether it's through amendments, this document's not right now. I don't think that the public outreach has been enough to where people really understand the consequences of what we're voting on. And I would like somebody to come up with an answer for that. Right now, if it's got to be a veto, let it be, or whatever. There's some things that went forward and the things that were unclear, and we can debate. Bill did a lot of research on the 2 foot and came up with the multiplier, and that looks real good. That's about where I'm at. But, you know, we have debate whether that's real or not. There's stipulations, whatever. We talked about going to our next, going to a 7. We're currently at an 8 in our CRS. And going to a 7. That was a great question asked tonight about what's our maximum bang for our dollar. And you brought into conversation something that we hadn't really brought up, you know, open space, you know. And so just within East Ascension, not on the west side, but within East Ascension, we have a very close and a good study on the Panama Conway. Spent a lot of money, millions of dollars, whatever. We don't have that same caliber of study on the New River Basin or further up. So, is it worth trying to put something forward? I know what we're trying to achieve in the outreach and the cry from the people about building up and building up and building up. I'm with that 100%. But do we need to look at things more before we throw something exactly at it? And I can't say that we all in total understanding of everything that we voted on the last time. Okay? So we sat here tonight and we did a lot of debating, but it was based on somebody's facts that they based it on their opinions. We're not professionals. We need somebody to look at this and come back with some solid recommendations to us. And you know, there's a lot of consequences to what we do in legislation here. And I'm going to tell you what, you find 10 people it helps, you'll find one of them it hurts. Some of the things that's very strong in the area that I represent is land rights. That's people are very strong about land rights. So you've got to persuade that landowner that he can't do something with his land, right? Now you know, if it's just telling him that he can't hurt his neighbor, that's one thing. But just flat out telling him he can't do nothing with his land is not right. I'm not necessarily against the 2 foot on the FEMA, the freeboarding, okay? But I think everybody has a choice, unless you're buying in a subdivision where somebody already set that grade for you. But I mean, a lot of people have a choice of going high. I went 6 foot high. My brother's probably 12 foot high, okay? And I can throw a baseball and hit his house. Okay, that's how close we are to each other. Yeah. I used to could hit the top. I can't anymore. But anyway, so, you know, there's choices for people to make. But we need to take a good look. And I'm gonna tell you, I agree with some of the speakers here on both sides of the subject as far as the veto goes, because everybody respects opinions. I represent people, and as Mr. Lawler said, don't browbeat me though. I don't think any legislation tonight is going to ruin my grandkids or their kids. But I can tell you this much, I think we don't have enough clarity on this towards everybody in the parish and what we're doing right now. So, if changes comes in the form of a veto and us taking another look at it, so be it. If changes come in the way of us amending, so be it. But I don't know that we got the time to amend this all tonight. Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome. Mr. Joseph.
Hey, Sean, you don't mind coming up here? rested for this?
Bring out the big guns next.
Good. Get the expert.
Sean, you've been doing our reviewing of all our plans, subdivision, houses, and everything for about 3 or 4 years now, huh? 3?
Yeah, from '05 to '08, and we came back in 2016.
Sean, you done read this ordinance. Is this gonna affect us from your point of view? Make your job more difficult because of all the obstacles that administration says, or how Bill wrote it?
The most confusion would be with those, more from the building permit office, the half acres, 1 acre, and the 2 acre type lots. In my opinion, the most of the subdivision stuff, there hasn't been that much of a change. If anything, a lot of what H&TB put down was documenting in the policy what we were always asking from consultants. It just makes it easy for me if they ever push back to say it's ordinance now, or the future ERA, or an internal staff member of the parish. But to me, the toughest part for me is looking at the ordinance. It probably will be the half acres, less than half acres, and the 2 acres. Just knowing how does that apply? Is it 12-inch slabs that part of your fill? It's essentially blocking water anyway, because if it doesn't have a void in it. Those little nuances to me appear to be the most confusing part. And yes, the 500-year part, but it's one of those, if you can't find an elevation, can you fault the parish for not enforcing it? Those little 2 things should be the trickiest part, and I think it is the single family building permit office would have the most struggle. That's my opinion on it.
Did you have any input on this document from your point of view?
It's one of those things. Everyone's had a touch on commenting on something or suggesting on something, I guess, since 2017 through this whole process. Yes, we've been part of the review of a couple of items, throw out some suggestions, and some of us take them, some of them we don't. There's meeting in the ground on a couple of things, and so I guess more of my role was more of a, some of the technical aspects. Could this be enforced? Can it not be enforced? Type of questions, rather than, I don't want to be perceived as CSRS was hired to thoroughly vet ordinances and present a recommendation and saying this is what our firm has researched and this is what we're recommending. We're not saying it's bad, it's just that it hasn't been part of our role in this whole process. It's just more of a peer technical review part.
Okay. All right. Thanks. HNTB. Ma'am, you're going to have to forgive me if I forgot your name.
Melissa Kennedy.
Melissa, all right. I forget everybody's name. Yes. Miss Melissa, I know I had you come to my meeting, strategic plan, and y'all did the watershed deal with the comment. How important is doing the rest of the study to actually give the public what they need from this document, from your point of view as an engineer?
From the current proposed ordinance document is what you're
Correct.
asking? The intent of the watershed study is to go back and evaluate all the different watersheds to be able to then kind of tie them together and how they relate, or determine are some of these things that are impacted in one watershed going to be the same in the other watersheds. We haven't determined that. As far as the ordinance goes, there are very good things in there. There are inconsistencies in there right now that I think need to be fixed. Nothing in there, having restrictions here or doing this or going 2 feet, none of these things are bad in terms of floodplain management. They're all very positive in terms of floodplain management. There are some concerns about enforcement of some of these things as well. But again, you guys all made very good points, so it's kind of back in your court on what you think is the best way to manage both from the floodplain and, as you said, individual properties' right. I can advise. The one thing I do want to say, though, when it comes to fill mitigation, it's not just dig or fill, dig a hole and fill. There are other things that impact that. It has to do with, as Ms. Casso said, how the water flows either through the site, around the site, and making sure you take that into consideration when you do your fill mitigation. So I wanted to set that straight. It's not just filling. You have to do it in the right way. You have to compensate for it in the right way. And the other thing I also wanted to say regarding the design, there's specific design criteria. The design criteria that are implemented now, they don't take into account like a very high rain event and a very, very short period of time that happened today. As you're right, you've got flash flooding and then your drainage system drained it away. So a lot of the criteria aren't going to necessarily address that specifically. So those things have to be taken into consideration when we're talking about these things. It's not just purely do this and that solves everything, or do this and that's going to solve everything. It's a combined impact effect. I don't know if that answer is probably way long-winded.
That helps some of us, because some of us, we didn't have all the knowledge of this, and any information you give us will be appreciated. So, how many governments or municipalities, whatever, you have done this type of work or help, assist, contract?
Well, we're currently just Ascension and East Baton Rouge right now. Personally, myself, our company has done others as well. I couldn't say how many, but others.
I mean, y'all really professional in this.
Yes.
And so when you come to Ascension Parish and we ask you for half of a study and then ask you for your professional service on how to write an ordinance, and then we write one, we take your information, then we write one, and then base it, you don't agree with everything in it because all your professional service information, that experience you have in it, wasn't taken and being advised on.
That's correct, but I also want to clarify that when we embarked on this, revising the ordinances was not part of our original scope. We were requested to review the current ordinances and see if there are things that could be looked at that would help wording, phrasing, that would help improve the intent of the ordinance. So that is what we did. In our implementation plan that we developed for the whole watershed floodplain, we talked about the steps forward to get to that point, and that's what we prepared. We have not actually embarked on the actual implementing that program to evaluate all the different watersheds, et cetera, do a more in-depth research into watersheds, analysis with modeling, et cetera. That has not all been done.
And basically that's because it's $2 million.
I don't know if that's the reason.
Well, roughly $2 million. I mean, that's the number.
Yes, that's the fee.
So this is where I'm at. That $2 million. Okay, so, we have some people say, raise it up, it's going to save people lives. We're going to save their household, their investment. But on the other hand, we didn't want to invest $2 million to get the true professional information that we needed. From my opinion, I don't know about none of them. That's just my opinion. Because HMTB been here for about 4 years trying to do this? Or how long?
August of 2017.
2017. And as some people say, we've been here and then we put it off, then they'll come up. And the only reason I'm saying all this because as soon as I became chairman of strategic planning, everybody say, send it to Joe, send it to OJ. So I had the administration come here and said, I want everybody involved in this. You, Sean, administration, every expert they got, legal, and I think we went through it very thoroughly on what we needed to do or where we were. And it came back to be $2 million. And then, then we said, guess what? Let's write something up, and we're going to forget about that $2 million. That $2 million is always in my head.
No, that's not how that is.
And that's where we are today, because we are very confused on what is the value of our constituents. I agree with him. Every home here, person value is that's the most expensive thing they have, except the life, someone life. I'm like Todd, I'm like, who are? I mean, you know, at first I had a real good, I know where I was going, you know? But this document is not perfect. And who's going to be the one to argue this document to make it perfect? Apparently, administration and some of our councilmen, they haven't got to that point yet. So, O'Neill, and I asked the person who reviewed our plans, I asked the person who actually did the engineering part of it, O'Neill, legally, you see major problems with our ordinance?
I've had issues with it. The recommendation I said was zero net fill, because that seemed to be the most, that has withstood a challenge. The state of New Jersey has zero net fill. It was argued whether that was arbitrary and capricious. It was found not to be, and then it was taken to the U.S. Supreme Court, and they denied writs on that. So that's been the position why that's the best defendable position from a legal standpoint, not from a political standpoint, from a legal standpoint.
All right. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Can I ask Mr. Melissa one question? Where did HMTB get that 3 foot from?
The 3 foot was in the original ordinance. When we reviewed it, we just interpreted it as the intent was to limit it to 3 feet. So we made edits based on that. There was always a 3 foot limitation in the original, in the ordinance, the current ordinance. I don't know where that came from.
So it's arbitrary?
I guess. You'd have to.
Jake Snyder. I'm just saying, when you did the study and you went with 3 foot, it was because you were told to?
No, we weren't told to go with 3 foot. We were just asked to review the existing ordinances to see if there was anything that could be done relatively quickly to improve them. And that's what our original task was to do. And I thought we did that.
So you just left the 3 foot?
We left the 3 foot, and we put in more clarifying language on how to implement that, as well as for doing the drainage impact studies for developments, as Sean alluded to. We put in some more technical requirements to make sure that the submittals were meeting the intent of the ordinance.
So professionally, could you say we ought to do 3 foot parish-wide?
I am not going to say whether you should do 3 foot parish-wide. I can argue zero net fill. I understand their concerns about having high fill and it impacting their neighbors, theoretically, if it's engineered correctly. But again, it's based on your design criteria. So a 2016 flood would not have helped, wouldn't have made a difference. But if it was designed for the criteria that it was supposed to, you are supposed to take into consideration any drainage that either comes off-site onto your site when you do the design. So those things should be taken into consideration so that what you're talking about impacting your neighbor doesn't happen.
So, Melissa, before you leave, is it possible that if you did these further watershed studies, that you would determine that some of these areas need zero fill, not zero net, but zero?
Well, there are areas that are not within the floodplain at all. So the fill requirements aren't necessarily required in those areas. That's not what you, I misinterpreted and
Look, it's a question for another day, not a problem.
The areas areas that are so severe.
Oh, okay,
Like,
yes,
That's what
yes,
thank you.
yes. There are areas, well, you know, you have a big, a large portion of the parish is the McElroy Swamp. You're gonna get to the point of where it's just not gonna be economically feasible because you're gonna have to take up so much area to mitigate the amount of fill that you would need to get above the base flood elevation, that the amount of area you need could exceed the amount of area that you want to fill. So it just would not be economically viable. I'm guessing.
Mhm. I understand, you haven't done it yet. So, I think that's all, that was the only question I had. So, I know we have some second rounds of questions that are gonna happen. Bill?
Well, a couple of clarifications, Melissa. You know, you're acting like these are exclusive, mutually exclusive, zero net fill and limiting the fill to 3 feet, but they're not. I mean, we can have zero net fill and limit the fill to 3 feet.
Yes, you can do that, yes.
So you mitigate up to 3 feet.
You can have that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that, I mean, you can have, again, just clarification, you can have zero net fill, but you can limit the fill to
Correct.
some number.
Correct.
When we talk about the 2 feet above the BFE, since that BFE is a relative number and it varies all the way across the parish depending on the firm maps, correct?
Correct.
So if you did a study in these other basins, would that change? Would the BFEs change?
It could.
So if the BFEs change, then it'd still be 2 feet above the BFE. If you had required somebody to put the house 2 feet above the BFE, if the BFE was changed because of these studies, that number would change too, correct?
Correct.
So what I'm trying to understand is that whether you did a modeling of other waterways besides Panama Conway, would that have any effect on whether you went 1 foot or 2 feet above the BFE?
The only thing I would say is, like for the Bayou Conway Panama Canal, the BFEs changed. Some went down and some went up. So depending on when you built would have an impact.
But what I'm asking is that would that affect the relativity?
No.
Would you? Yes. So if we set this at 2 feet above the BFE or 1 foot above the BFE, whether you did studies in these other basins or not would have no effect on that.
No.
Yes or no?
I'm just because.
Have effect or not have effect?
Because you're basing it on what the BFE is right now, and I'm just saying if
I'm
changes.
saying it's a relative number. It changes with the BFE. So if
Yes.
if you complete these studies, then that number's going to change, and it's going to. But the relativity of it doesn't change.
The relativity would not change.
So if I set it at 1 foot above, it wouldn't be better to set it at 2 feet above. It wouldn't have any effect on that, is what I'm saying. If I did that study, would the study say, oh, it's better for you to go 1 foot above the BFE than 2?
No, the
Correct.
study's not going to say that.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say correct. But
You
I
like
agree.
doing that.
And the same thing with the 3 feet. You know, we keep talking about doing these studies in the other basins, and somehow we're going to come up with this magical mathematical solution that's going to say that 3 feet wasn't right, it should be 3.2 or 3.8 or 2.7. Is that the way it's going to work?
That's not necessarily the total intent of the study. The intent of the study is to be able to
No, but what I'm
have.
asking, if you did the study, you did the same study, you set up the H&H model, whatever model that you're using in these other basins, at the end of that, would you say, you know what, 3.0 is right in because we mathematically looked at this, 3.0 is right in Panama Conway and in the Amy River Basin it should be 2.8.
We would not come up with a recommendation like that.
There you go. So it doesn't, the 3 feet, and I've got the tape from May the 7th, 2018, when you made the original recommendation to East Ascension drainage. And there were no caveats there. You know, she also said she thought the 3-foot max was a good recommendation. You didn't say that was a good recommendation for Pamela Conway. This was to modify the ordinance, and you guys made a modification to the ordinance to institute this 3 feet max. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So when you brought that, you had these other changes that you recommended to the ordinance, and you also made changes to the ordinance that said 3 feet, that changed everything so that 3 feet max was a limit with more or less zero net fill, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa.
Didn't Councilman Dawson tell you to use 3 foot?
No.
O'Neill, what was that email? You got
An email that you put 3 feet in, that's what, there's an email.
Well, you're throwing this out here? What? I never told, how could I even tell him? I never told him that 3 feet max. The 3 feet max was already in the ordinance.
Yes, the 3 feet was in the ordinance. When we were doing our preliminary look at it, we looked at it and we felt that that was the intent of the ordinance, was to limit it to 3 feet. That was how we interpreted it, and then we made other technical changes to it to make the implementation of that ordinance better and clearer.
So let's clear this up. Did I tell you to set that at 3 feet?
No.
No, thank you.
O'Neill, you got that email? Read it.
Well, you don't have it, but you're gonna accuse me of something and you don't have it?
I have an email.
Well, where is it? Let me see it.
It says, attached or proposed revision to the drainage ordinance to include the no net fill with a 3-foot limit is requested by Councilman Dawson. That came.
Well, that's it. They didn't say that zero net fill. That's to attach those changes. What's the date of that?
That's from Melissa, dated April 12th, 2019.
They made the recommendation of 3 feet on May the 7th, 2018. So you think I made a recommendation a year later to them? You can listen to the tape if you want to. May 7th, 2018, 21 minutes and 54 seconds is where that starts. I'm sorry. Thank you, Melissa.
Any other
So
questions?
I'm gonna also make a motion to override the veto.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to override the veto. Motion by Mr. Dawson, second by Mr. Satterley. Mr. Satterley, did you have any further
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
comments?
And I'll try to do this briefly again.
Gentlemen, please.
3 feet, SME feet, he said, she said, 2.7, 8.5, 12.9. My house, again, almost got water within 2 or 3 inches today. My good friend and neighbor, your state senator, Eddie Lambert, lives 2 doors down, passed in front of my house, had to go to a key vote. Otherwise, he said I wouldn't even get out in this because the interstate was shut down. And he looked at my house and he said, Doc, do you need my help? I'd like to be on record to thank him, and also Commissioner Wade Scheck-Snyder, who called up, and I've been critical of the Planning Commission, kind of made me feel bad. Doc, do you need help with sandbags, et cetera? Okay? In those conversations with those 2 gentlemen, particularly with Mr. Lambert, and I might just mention he happens to be an attorney, I said, I just don't understand this thing we're going to do tonight, and I'm sitting here looking at the water in my yard. Isn't there some state laws I keep hearing about, passed in the 1800s? I've spoke about them before. I don't have the actual numbers there in the civil codes. I'm sure Mr., if need be, O'Neill Parent could supply that. I call them the thou shalt not flood thy neighbor laws. And yes, they're civil codes, and I understand the difference between that and so forth. But our forefathers said way back then, it's undebatable. There are 2 types of property. That's what we've been talking about all night tonight and for the last 2 years. dominant and servient. And by definition, topographically, by height, a dominant property is higher than a servient one. I could take this bottle of water here and show you what gravity would do if I dumped it. It'd be very dramatic on the cameras. I won't do that. It might ruin my smartphone. But it's going to fall from higher to lower. And that's what happens when properties next to each other are higher and lower. In that law, thou shalt not flood thy neighbors, it clearly says that the servient property, and Eddie jumped quickly in our conversation. He said, right, has to take the water. I say it a little different way, because the law states that you shall not alter the velocity or the flow of the water if you are a servient property. Yet in this parish, prior to this ordinance, if we ever get it off the ground, we can build, at least some of us can, depending on who you are and lot size and so forth, unlimited fill. Wow. So I'm going to go back to this dialogue stuff and ask a series of questions. And I'm going to start with you, Jerome, if you mind stepping back up to the mic, sir. Councilman Dawson asked you repetitively. I never heard an answer. Do you, sir, recommend unlimited fill? Well, I apologize, I did hear. You said the administration does. Would you define a difference between you and the administration?
I work for the administration.
I don't need that definition. In your professional, I'm going to ask it where you can't wiggle out of this one. In your professional opinion, I know Kenny's standing right there, sitting right next to you, to your left.
Mm-hmm.
Do you favor unlimited fill, sir? And before you answer, watch out, Mr. Chereau. Watch out, Melissa. I do know your name from HNTB. Bring y'all up to the microphone and ask you the same questions. Yes or no? Yes or no? Do you favor unlimited fill?
I can't answer that in a yes or no fashion, Councilman Satterley. And the reason I'm saying that is because with unlimited fill, you're talking about unmitigated limited fill? Are we talking about zero net fill?
Well, I don't know.
Those are two different things.
So I think it's a fair question if we're going to accuse Honorable Councilman Dawson of trying to orchestrate a 3-foot arbitrary number. His administration ever told you that I want you to answer a question this way or that, or can you just professionally tell me whether or not you recommend unlimited fill?
I recommend the zero net fill policy that's before you right now. Not before you, but that's being recommended.
But our current code doesn't have that. Our current code says some people can bring in unlimited fill. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
All right.
They have to
so
mitigate.
Do you think our current code?
Mitigate
do you think our code is wrong in that regard? Not if they mitigate it, so therefore just leave that in there? Is that what you would recommend to us?
What I would say is that I would remove the portion where we have certain properties that are allowed free 3 feet of fill.
Because you see, I go back to my own situation this morning, okay?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't ditches, as I said. They drained as rapidly as they filled, because the parish has cleaned them out really well.
Mm-hmm.
What caused the problem is, when I bought my home 25 years ago, I was one of 2 houses in my whole subdivision. St. Andrews, the Getty community, wasn't behind me. The community right across the street from me wasn't there. Heck, you had to almost go down past Bayou Manchac to look at Santa Maria Golf Course. That community was being built on the Baton Rouge side of Manchac, but there was no Manchac crossing, there was no Manchac plantation, et cetera. So all these, and each time they built higher next to each other, and the dominant and servient law was disobeyed, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And then that dominant property that flooded that servient one, that dominant one became servient because the next one was higher than that, and then the next one was higher than that, and that one became servient, and it's a mess.
Okay.
All right?
Can I answer one thing, though?
Sure, go
related
ahead.
to that? When we had the 2016 flood, the majority of property damage occurred in Santamont. And I think everybody would agree with that, Councilman Kluot included. The last time we approved a subdivision in Santamont, I look back and we can't even remember. So when we're talking about elevated property in subdivisions, creating this massive disaster with flooding, the majority of properties that were flooded in 2016 were outside of those areas where we've had recent subdivisions.
Well, I'm not in the flood zone, and I'm at BFE at 1, but like Mr., who was it that testified here? Mr. Kluot, for one of not being at BFE +2, he would have flooded, his neighbors did at 1, okay? and I would have flooded had it wasn't the fact that I just happened to be on piers. I mean, that's a fact in my mind, and it's irrefutable, just like in my mind, the dominant Soviet law. But thank you. Mr. Pendarvis, are you still in the courtroom, sir?
He stepped out.
Well, I want an answer to the question. I'm not trying to make any problems with the gentleman, but he said that in his testimony, and actually he called you out, Ms. Casso, he said if you haven't sold your property prior, and I think he was referring to 9/30, would you support the spill ordinance? Look me in the eye. Ms. Casso, what is the answer?
Yes.
The answer is yes. So I want everybody to know, we're not up here trying to just do something crazy and arbitrary or whatever. Even to our own financial detriment, is what she's saying. I'd be willing to tell you, for the good of the whole community and everything, this is something we need to be done. I wanted to clear that up in the record. Mr. Domain, keep with the dialogue. No, ma'am, we've had public comment. I heard this. There's going to be a taking of property without compensation. Is that so? I don't think this law is keeping folks from building at all, or taking their property away out of commerce. What it's doing is helping them build smartly and not burden others next to them relative to flooding them and other such horrible things. So I disagree with that as well. Didn't have all of my napkin notes the first time. One more thing. There's a letter, Madam Chairman, that we all received today from Chase Melanson. I thought it to be very insightful. In fact, I shared it immediately on my website, on Facebook this morning, and got a lot of positive feedback. And it demonstrates, 2 years ago when he built this house, before we had this ordinance or anything, under the old laws, he built that BFE +2, and yes, it cost him, not the numbers that we keep hearing from the developers, tens of thousands of dollars, but around $4,500, which he said saving him his insurance of about whatever it was, $800 or $900 a year. Within 5 years, he had recouped. And like myself, it's a beautiful home with chain wall. And so again, I resent and take offense if everybody says it's ugly. And I bet you if he was here tonight, but unfortunately he wrote us that he couldn't be, he would tell you. In fact, he didn't need to come and tell you, because we all have it. And I would respectfully ask, Madam Chairman, that we enter that letter into the record. Because what it shows is a beautiful brick home that looks still like a traditional home on grade, but it's got some yellow tape about 2 or 3 feet off the horizon, off the grade. And it says in there, that's where the floor of my house is if you come inside. Can't even tell it because of the clever way in which he manipulated this. And I tell you this, that house will sell easily.
It's displaced the same amount of water surface.
Excuse me, sir. I'm not going to do the chairman's job, but I yield, Madam Chairman.
I'm sorry. Okay, any other comments? Mr. Lawler?
Yes. Yeah. Parish President, look, I understand there's some issues here, but I watched WBRZ a couple weeks ago, and we saw the interview. The New River, Panama Canal Basin, because of the West Shore levee, could put 3 inches of water in there. That's not my area, and I think that runs through part of y'all's and part of Bill's. And we're asking, you were asking, what is Garrett Graves, what is the federal government going to do for us? To paraphrase John Canby, that's not what the feds are going to do for Ascension Parish, but what can Ascension Parish do for its citizens? We're sitting here vetoing something that could help our citizens, at the same time saying, hey, what are the feds going to do for us? I'm not going to rely on the feds. It's going to take them forever. We have been waiting to clean out the Amite River, and absolutely it has to be done, because if you don't do that, it doesn't do you any good to clean out Muddy Creek or Bayou Manchax. It all flows in there. But this is an opportunity for this council to do something for the citizens of Ascension Parish. Mr. President, I ask that you withdraw the veto.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second to override the veto. Or is there any further comment? Okay, so I see more hands. Mr. Turner.
I'm trying to make my comments rather quickly. We all know that the document is not perfect. In my opinion, I think we should have some type of zone requirements as far as what type of fill or what is needed in different zones for different parts of the parish, because they are all not the same. But, I mean, it's constantly going back and forth. In my opinion, I think we need a 6-month moratorium until we can figure out something permanent or something, as a more fully developed document, instead of being scared of the developers and telling them we can't do 6 months out of it, they're gonna go out of business in 6 months. We know that's not true. I mean, that's what I think we should do.
That's a motion, Mr. Attorney?
Yeah, I make that as a motion. Well, council can make that as a motion.
This
But
is
then
not,
what
we
should
can't
do.
take that up in this, it's not something that
Right, but you know, that's
we can do.
my opinion, I think.
I
that's what we should do.
appreciate that that is your feeling, and certainly that is something we can discuss at another time. Mr. Cagney.
Madam Chair, I've heard a lot of comments tonight, a lot good and bad. But one thing I heard consistently, and you even stated yourself, that the current ordinance that we approved and the parish president vetoed it had conflicts, it had inconsistencies and even flaws, the word we used. And then zero net fill was brought up. And then our legal counsel was asked, but the current ordinance, the way it stands, do you anticipate any legal challenges? He said it would be subject to legal challenges. And then he also stated that in another parish, zero net fill was challenged but successfully defended. Zero net fill with 100% mitigation on each way. If we want to limit the amount of fill to 3 feet and then zero mitigation, I mean, it's zero net fill, mitigation in every case, then that to me, it kind of covers all the bases. The other question that I brought up in a number of meetings to discuss this was enforcement. And I asked the staff, I asked Jerome and his people, if this ordinance is adopted, do you have the manpower to enforce it right now? And the answer was no. We would have to go to the parish president and request more people to enforce it. And when you get to the enforcement part of it, there are laws written every day in all different levels of legislation. And it's words on paper. If those laws or ordinances are not enforced, quite frankly, they're not worth the paper they're written on. So we have to take into consideration what the staff has to do to make this happen, the administration, and that has a bearing, I think, on what we do. My personal feelings are we have an opportunity to stop and look at everything, and I think that's what Randy's talking about. There's been some confusion, there's been some change, and if we stop it and start and say, hey, let's have a meeting of stakeholders, concerned councilmen that can meet in small groups and discuss this thing, then instead of having to pass it and then make changes that may not be suitable or right, let's get it right before we go forward. That's my comment.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have any more comments? Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Are there any objections?
Yes.
You're objecting to your
Your
own
motion?
motion to override?
I know that I have.
Don't object to your own motion to override. All right, are there any objections?
Yes.
Yes. Madam Secretary, roll call.
Councilman
Please
Joseph,
indicate what the vote will be.
we're voting to override the veto.
So, thank you very much.
I'm still thinking, so I'm abstaining right now.
Councilman Turner,
Yes.
Councilman Satterly,
I'll get the vote.
Yes.
Councilman Dempsey Lambert,
No.
Councilman Kluwat,
No.
Councilman Lawler,
Yes.
Councilman Todd Lambert,
Yes.
Councilman Cagnolati,
No.
Councilman Johnson,
Yes.
Chairwoman Casso.
Yes.
Hey, you left me out.
Oh, Councilman Bill Dawson.
Did they? Yes.
7 yeas, 3 nays, and 1 abstain.
There you go.
So that motion as a
Do you
result.
want to vote now?
You leave it abstain? Huh?
He wants to leave it as abstain.
Well, what's the reason for abstaining?
I'm confused, I don't understand.
So we have a 7 to 3, so the motion cannot, pass. We would have had to have had 8. So the veto the override stands. And we will get, as we said in our last meeting, we will all get back to work. Veto stands, excuse me. We needed 8, the veto stands. And I'll say that again, we all get back to work.
Madam Chair, can we request a 5-minute recess?
We certainly can, because Madam Chair is leading that bill.
Second.
Thank you. We'll take a break. Thank you very much, everyone. This meeting is, the chair will entertain a motion to reconvene.
Motion.
Have a motion and a second to reconvene. And we'll begin with item number 18, reading of an ordinance, budget amendment number 3, to amend the 2019 budget. Mr. Parrington.
In order to amend the ordinance approving, adopting, and appropriating the 2019 operating and capital budgets for the parish of Ascension adopted by Ascension Parish Council on the 15th day of November 2018. Section 1, the Ascension Parish Council hereby ordains that the ordinance approving, adopting, and appropriating the 2019 operating and capital budgets for the parish of Ascension is hereby amended, approved, and appropriated as follows. Operating budget, Recreation Fund, demolition of Santa Mar Park Building, expenditures and other financing, uses transfers out of Park Construction Fund, $200,000. Capital budget, Park Construction Fund, demolition of Santa Mar Park, revenues and other financing sources transfer in from Recreational Fund, $200,000. Expenditures, contract payments, $200,000. This ordinance submitted to a vote. The vote thereon was as follows.
Motion.
Have a motion to... We got to open a public comment.
He meant motion for open public
I
comment.
think that's what you meant.
That's exactly what I meant.
There you go. Have a motion and a second to open a public comment.
Motion closed.
Have a motion and a second to close the public comment.
Motion on the amendment.
Have a motion to move the ordinance and a second to move the ordinance. Are there any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 21, reading of an ordinance, budget amendment number 4, to amend the 2019 budget.
In order to amend the ordinance approving, adopting, and appropriating 2019 operating and capital budgets for the parish of Ascension, adopted by Ascension Parish Council on the 15th day of November 2018, Section 1, the Ascension Parish Council hereby ordains that the ordinance approving, adopting, and appropriating 2019 operating and capital budgets for the parish of Ascension is hereby amended, approved, and appropriated as follows. Operating budget, Fire District Number 2, expenditures and other financing uses, transfer out of Fire District Number 2 Construction Fund, $157,000. Capital budget, Fire District Number 2 Construction Fund, Modest Fire Station, revenue and other financing sources transferring from Fire District Number 2, $157,000. Expenditures, contract payments, $157,000. The ordinance have been submitted to a vote. The vote thereon was as follows.
Have a motion and a second to open the public hearing.
Motion to close.
Motion and a second to close the public hearing.
I'm going to move to amend just to make sure it's very clear because in our packet it says transfer in from recreation funds. So I'm going to move to amend.
I read it right.
So it says transfer in from Fire District Number 2 Construction Fund.
I read it that way.
Yeah, no, you read it the right way. I just want to make sure there's no confusion later on.
Okay.
To amend it just to make sure we got it all straight.
Motion to...
Second, as amended.
As amended. Have a motion by Councilman Lawler and a second by Councilman Johnson to move the ordinance as amended. Are there any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
I do have a question after.
Okay.
And maybe it's kind of a procedural question. Maybe I should look this up myself, but what's controlling? What's read or what's written?
Well, I read the ordinance. It says read.
It's read, okay.
Right.
Just making sure it's right. Okay.
All right. Okay. Let's see where I am. 24. That's where I was. Item number 24, reading of an ordinance to amend the Ascension Parish Code of Ordinances, Section 18-3, Ascension Parish Board of Mental Health and Addictive Disorders Advisory Board, to increase the number of board members from 5 to 9, and to authorize the board to dismiss a board member who is absent from 3 meetings in a one-year period. Mr. Parrington.
To amend the Ascension Parish Code of Ordinances, Chapter 18, Article 1, Section 18.3, Ascension Parish Board of Mental Health and Addictive Disorders Advisory Board, whereas the Ascension Parish is a local government subdivision defined by Article 6, Section 44, Louisiana Constitution, 1974. Whereas the Parish of Ascension is the governing and responsible body over the Board of Mental Health and Addictive Disorders Advisory Board. Whereas Article 6 of the Home Rule Charter of Ascension Parish, adopted May 4th, 1993, identifies the process and manner to adopt ordinances regulating the land, regulating the parish. Whereas the Code of Ordinances, Chapter 18, Article 1, Section 18.3 was last amended on November 20th, 2008. Now therefore be it ordained by the Ascension Parish Governing Authority, the Code of Ordinances of Ascension Parish Board of Mental Health and Addictive Disorders Advisory Board, Chapter 1, Chapter 18, Article 1, Section 18.3 is amended as more fully described in Exhibit A attached to and made a part hereof. In the event any portion of the ordinance is ever held invalid or unconstitutional for any reason by any court of competent jurisdiction over it, such portion shall be deemed a separate, distinct, and independent provision, should not affect the validity of the remaining portions of the ordinance. The ordinance shall be in full effect as submitted by law. The ordinance submitted to a vote. The vote thereon was as follows.
Motion, open public hearing.
Have a motion to open the public hearing together with a second by Councilman Todd Lambert and Councilman Cagnolati.
Motion to close.
Have a motion and a second motion to open by Councilman Johnson.
Motion to move the
Second
ordinance.
by, who got the second? Mr.
Made a
Cagnolati.
motion
And he's got a motion to move the ordinance.
Second. Second by Todd.
Second by Todd.
Question, quick question.
Do we have any questions? Yes, Mr.
O'Neill.
Yes, sir.
Just when we change something like this on one of these boards, is there's not some state charter that
This is a
governs
political subdivision. This is created by the Home Rule Charter.
that? Good deal. Thank you, sir. I just want to remind everybody that I think it was close to 10 years ago, we had a review of that board,
Right.
and we had some issues, and at that time, that we fixed the issues, and that board might have been reduced at that time. I don't remember exactly, but, thank you.
Thank you, sir. So any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 27, reading of an ordinance to revoke a 10-foot utility servitude running across property owned by Charles E. Powers Jr. and E. C. Powers, property owned by Carl J. Powers, excuse me, I missed the lot description, 6A1, Lot 5B1A, and Lot 6B2A, property owned by Carl J. Powers, Lot 6B1A, and property owned by Sean E. Powers, painter, Lot 5A1, of the E and H and Anatoly Shortan property. Mr. Parrington.
To revoke a 10-foot utility servitude running across property owned by Charles E. Powers and Edith C. Powers, Lot 6A1, Lot 5B1A, Lot 6B2A, property owned by Carl Powers, Lot 6B1A, and property owned by Sean E. Powers, painter, Lot 5A1, of the E.H. and Anatole Shortain property is more fully depicted on the survey maps showing the re-subdivisions of Lot 6B1, 6B2 of the E.H. and Anatole Shortain property into lots 6B1A, 6B2A by McLean Taylor, Inc., dated March 20th, 2019, and recorded as instrument number 96747144 of the Ascension Parish records. Said servitude is shown on aforementioned map and attached hereto as Exhibit A. Whereas the petitioners have petitioned the Ascension Parish Council to revoke a 10-foot utility servitude running across property owned by Charles E. Powers and Edith C. Powers, Lot 6A1, Lot 5B1A, and Lot 6B2A, property owned by Carl J. Powers, Lot 6B1A, and property owned by Sean E. Powers, painter, Lot 5A1 of the E.H. and Anatole Shortain property. And whereas the Planning Department and Engineering Department have reviewed and researched and said requests and have no objections to the revocations. Wherefore, the Ascension Parish Council hereby ordains that it approves the revocation of a 10-foot utility servitude running across the property of Charles E. Powers Jr. and Edith C. Powers, Lot 6A1, Lot 5B1A, and Lot 6B2A, property owned by Carl Powers, Lots 6B1A, and property owned by Sean E. Powers, painter, Lot 5A1 of the E.H. and Anatole Shortain property. Property is more fully depicted on the survey map showing the re-subdivisions of Lot 6B1 and 6B2 of the E.H. and Anatole Shortain property, and Lot 6B1A and 6B2A by McLean Taylor, dated March 20, 2019, and recorded at instrument number 967144 of the Ascension Parish Public Records. Said servitude is shown on aforesaid map and attached hereto. As Exhibit A. All ordinances and parts of ordinances in conflict herewith are hereby and henceforth repealed. If any provision of the ordinance is held invalid, such invalidity should not affect other provisions herein which can be given effect without the invalid provisions. And to this effect, to this end, the provisions of this ordinance are hereby declared severable. This ordinance shall be effective 15 days after adoption. The ordinance has been submitted to a vote. The vote thereon was as follows.
Motion to open public hearing.
A motion and a second to open the public hearing.
Motion closed.
A motion and a second to close the public hearing.
Move the motion.
Have a motion by Councilman Kluot and a second by Councilman Todd Lambert to move the ordinance. Are there any questions?
Quick note,
Yes, sir.
Madam Chair, for all those people that know the area right there by New River Baptist Church in San Ramon, we always said Shatan. So now everybody will recognize who that is.
Thank you for,
Shatan property.
thank you for the clarification. Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Have a motion to adjourn.